Chapter 1. In the third year of my marriage to Ethan Hawthorne, he was killed in the line of duty. His twin brother, Elias, brought back a blood-stained insignia and told me in a hoarse voice, "Sienna, Ethan, he's not coming back." I fainted on the spot. When I woke up, I was frantic, desperate to find him, but my mother-in-law, Margaret, held me tight. In the months that followed, I tried to end my life. I swallowed sleeping pills, I slit my wrists, I threw myself into the river. 3 times I sought death, and 3 times I was saved. Everyone said, Colonel Hawthorne and Miss Hayes were so deeply in love. Yes, we were. So in love that it took 3 months after his death for me to learn the truth he wasn't the one who had died at all. On the evening after I was revived from my 3rd suicide attempt, I went to my in-laws' home, my face ashen. I wanted to ask Margaret for some of Ethan's old belongings, something to soothe my aching heart. But as I approached, I heard low voices coming from the back room. "Ethan, how much longer are you going to keep this up? Sienna has tried to kill herself for you 3 times." My fingers dug sharply into my palm. Ethan. Why was my mother-in-law calling my brother-in-law, Elias, by my husband's name? "Mom, just a little longer." The voice was clearly Elias, but the tone was achingly familiar. It was the same gentle way Ethan used to soothe me. Before he died, Elias asked me to take care of his wife. But Jocelyn is so frail and delicate, the shock of his death would surely kill her. I had to take his place, just for a while. I need to give her a child. With a child to live for, she'll be able to go on. My blood ran cold. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. So, it was Elias who had died, not Ethan. My husband was alive. He was living under his brother's name, sleeping right next door with Jocelyn Somers. But what about Sienna? Margaret's voice was urgent. "You sleep in Jocelyn's room every night. Have you even thought about how she feels? She's stronger than Jocelyn." Those words stabbed me like a knife. I staggered backward, accidentally knocking over a broom leaning against the wall. The room fell silent. I turned and ran as if a monster was chasing me. As I ran, a sharp pain shot through my hand. I opened my palm and saw that I had been clutching the insignia so tightly its pin had pierced my skin, drawing blood. For 3 months, I had clutched this insignia every night, crying myself awake from nightmares more times than I could count. But now it seemed utterly ridiculous. My husband wasn't dead. He had simply chosen to let me believe he was dead, all to spare his sister-in-law's feelings. 5 years ago, I met Ethan at a military base gala. He was the iron-willed colonel, and I was a dancer in the military arts troupe. Many women pursued him, and many men pursued me. But that night, he stood in the audience, his gaze burning into me as I finished a fiery revolutionary ballet. Then he strode onto the stage and in front of everyone draped his military greatcoat over my shoulders. "Miss Hayes," he said, "it's windy, don't catch a cold." Wrapped in his coat, my face flushed with a deep blush. He began to court me after that. Before every mission, he would make a detour to the arts troupe barracks to see me. The day I agreed to be his girlfriend, he got roaring drunk, spun me around in the courtyard, and declared, "Sienna, I, Ethan Hawthorne, will have only you for the rest of my life." After we were married, everyone said that Colonel Hawthorne doted on his wife, that he loved her to the bone. I too once believed he loved me more than life itself, but now, to take care of his sister-in-law, he was impersonating his dead brother, sharing a bed with her, and even planning to get her pregnant. And I, like an idiot, had cried for him, tried to die for him, and suffered in agony for him. Had he ever once considered that I could feel pain too? When I finally stumbled home in a daze, the local matchmaker, Mrs. Larkin, was there again. "Sienna, dear, Colonel Lawrence is being transferred to the island base in 2 weeks. This is the 7th time he sent me to ask. He said if you still say no, he'll never come back." Leo Lawrence, Ethan's comrade in arms. From the day I was declared a widow, he had come to my door time and again, asking for my hand in marriage. The first 6 times I refused. I believed that for the rest of my life I could only ever love Ethan Hawthorne. But now I looked up and said calmly, "All right, I'll marry him." Mrs. Larkin stared blankly. "Are you serious?" "I am." I managed a small smile. "Please tell Leo Lawrence that in 2 weeks I will marry him, and I'll go with him to the island." The curtain over the doorway was suddenly flung aside. Ethan stood there, his face dark and menacing. "Younger sister-in-law, who are you marrying?" I looked at him and suddenly found the situation laughable. "Big brother," I said softly. "That's my business." His next words were for the matchmaker, but his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist, the grip painfully tight. "My sister-in-law is under my care. She doesn't need to remarry. Besides, she loves Ethan so much, she would never remarry. Mrs. Larkin, don't come here again. Otherwise, don't blame me for being inhospitable." Mrs. Larkin looked astonished. But Sienna already agreed. Before she could finish, I quickly grabbed her arm. "Mrs. Larkin, didn't you say you were heading to the commissary? You should hurry, it'll close soon." The interruption seemed to work. Mrs. Larkin nodded quickly and bustled away. Once she was gone, Ethan finally seemed to relax. He took a half step closer, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sienna, even though Ethan is gone, don't worry, I'll take care of you. From now on, if any matchmakers come to the door, just send them away." In that moment, all I felt was a bitter sense of absurdity. He was hiding from me, sleeping in his sister-in-law's room every night, yet he was afraid I would run off and remarry. What kind of twisted logic was that? But I didn't expose him. I just nodded. In 2 weeks, I would be married to another man and gone from this place forever. He wouldn't be able to control me then. That night, as I was packing my suitcase, the telltale creak of a wooden bed frame came from the room next door. Before, when I heard that sound, I simply thought my brother-in-law and his wife had a good relationship. But now, every breath, every moan was like a dull knife carving into my flesh. That was unmistakably Ethan's guttural sound of passion, a sound he had once made only in my ear. "Ah!" A sharp scream pierced the night. I rushed outside just in time to see Ethan, carrying a disheveled Jocelyn, running out of their room. In the moonlight, a shocking splash of red bloomed on her white pajama pants. The family compound immediately erupted in commotion. Our neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, poked her head out. My, what's happened here? I heard they got a bit too vigorous in bed, and she started bleeding." Tusk. Elias always looked so serious, but who knew he was so passionate with his wife? Standing in the small crowd, I felt a chill seep into my bones. I turned to leave, but Mrs. Lawson grabbed my arm. "Sienna, you're his sister-in-law, you have to go with them to the hospital," fearing gossip. I had no choice but to throw on a coat and hurry to the hospital. In the hospital corridor, the sharp smell of antiseptic stung my eyes. Ethan was pacing anxiously. He froze when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile. "As your sister-in-law, I felt I should come and see." The operating room door suddenly opened and a doctor walked out. "Don't worry, sir, your wife is fine. She's pregnant. You'll need to be more gentle during intercourse from now on." Chapter 2. I stood in the hospital corridor, a loud ringing in my ears. The doctor's words, "She's pregnant," hit me like a sledgehammer. I instinctively looked at Ethan. I saw him freeze for a second, then a look of sheer ecstasy erupted in his eyes. He muttered under his breath, "This is great. Everything is finally getting back on track." I knew exactly what he meant. Jocelyn was pregnant. He could finally shed the identity of Elias Hawthorne and come back to me, but I didn't need him anymore. "However, the patient is anemic and needs a blood transfusion." The doctor's voice cut through my thoughts. Ethan immediately rolled up his sleeve, but the doctor stopped him. "Your blood type doesn't match. We need type B." I was type B. His gaze shifted to me. After a moment's hesitation, he walked over. "Sienna, your sister-in-law is pregnant. This child, we've been waiting for this for a long time." He paused. "Could you donate some blood for her? I promise after the baby is born, I'll make it up to you." Make it up to me? I scoffed internally. Was his idea of compensation to magnanimously return to my side as if granting a favor? "I can give blood, but I don't need you to make anything up to me." I spoke calmly and followed the nurse to have my blood drawn. As the needle pierced my vein, I watched my own crimson blood flow into the bag. I suddenly remembered my first year of marriage when I had a high fever. Ethan had carried me on his back for miles to get to the hospital. That day, as a similar needle went into my arm, he had gripped my hand tightly and said, "Don't be afraid, sweetheart, I'm right here." Now, my blood was going to flow into another woman's body to nourish their child. For the next few days, I rested at home. Through my window, I watched Ethan. He had stopped going to the base, instead shuttling between home and the hospital every day, carrying a thermos. One day it was chicken soup, the next it was sweet egg drop soup. Once, when I was sick in bed with a cold, he had been the one hovering over the stove, making all sorts of nourishing meals for me. The day Jocelyn was discharged from the hospital, the sweet scent of caramel candies filled the entire family compound. Ethan went from door to door with a jar of sweets, a wide, unrestrained smile on his usually stern face. "Jocelyn's pregnant. Have a candy to celebrate." "Congratulations, congratulations. You must be so thrilled to finally be expecting." He smiled and nodded, the joy of impending fatherhood radiating from him. Finally, he came to my door, his hand hesitating slightly as he offered me the candy. "Younger sister-in-law, congratulations, big brother." I took the candy, my smile perfectly polite. "I wish you and your family of 3 a long and happy life together." Ethan's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. My blessing was too proper, so proper it made him uneasy. Ever since Ethan Hawthorne's death, I had been either crying or making a scene. When had I ever been this calm? But before he could dwell on it, Jocelyn walked over and linked her arm through his, cooing, "Elias, darling, didn't we say we were going to treat Sienna to dinner?" To thank me for the blood donation, Jocelyn insisted on taking me out. I refused several times, but was eventually dragged into their car. At a downtown restaurant, the hostess greeted us warmly. "A table for 3 right this way." Her eyes flickered between Ethan and Jocelyn, and she smiled. "You two make a perfect couple." Then she looked at me. "And this must be your sister." "She's lovely." Ethan stiffened, but before he could speak, I answered in a gentle voice, "Yes, I'm his sister." The word was like a dagger in his heart, but as he glanced at Jocelyn's slightly swelling belly, he said nothing to correct me. Chapter 3. When it was time to order, he reeled off a list of dishes with practiced ease. No cilantro, light on the oil and salt, something with a bit of a sour and spicy kick. It was all of Jocelyn's favorites. Only when the waitress asked, "And what would the young lady like?" did he seem to remember I was there, turning his head to look at me. "I'm fine with anything." I lowered my head and sipped my tea, the steam blurring my vision. After the food arrived, I mechanically picked at the rice in my bowl, 1 grain at a time. Suddenly, my throat tightened. I looked down and realized with a jolt that the sweet dumplings in the soup had a sesame filling. I was allergic to sesame. Ethan used to remember every single one of my dietary restrictions. He would even remind the cooks in the mess hall to not use any sesame. Now he had ordered an entire plate of sesame-filled dumplings. "Sienna," Jocelyn noticed my strange complexion. "What's wrong?" Only then did Ethan look up. Seeing my flushed cheeks, he shot to his feet. "Did you eat the sesame?" It was getting harder to breathe. My vision started to go black. In a daze, I saw Ethan rush toward me, but he was stopped halfway by Jocelyn's pained cry. My stomach hurt so much, time seemed to freeze. I watched Ethan stand rooted to the spot, his eyes darting between me and Jocelyn, torn. Finally, he swept Jocelyn into his arms. As he left, he threw a hurried instruction to the waitress. "Please, get my sister to a hospital." Miss, the waitress's panicked calls grew more and more distant. Then, my consciousness faded, and I passed out completely. The sharp scent of antiseptic stung my eyes. I opened them to see a nurse changing my IV drip. "Oh, you're awake," the nurse breathed a sigh of relief. "It's a good thing the restaurant staff brought you in so quickly. Anaphylactic shock can be fatal." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw and burning. The image of Ethan carrying Jocelyn away, without a moment's hesitation, was seared into my mind. I closed my eyes, but tears streamed down my temples and into my hair. For the 3 days I was in the hospital, I lay alone in bed. The rash from the allergic reaction made my whole body itch, and my throat was so swollen I could barely swallow water. At my lowest point, I overheard the nurses whispering outside my door. "That pregnant woman in 308, her baby was just kicking up a storm. Her husband is worried sick." Not like the patient in here, 302. Such a severe allergic reaction, and her husband hasn't visited once. "It's like he's dead." I buried my face in the pillow. They were right, my husband was dead. He died in that mission 3 months ago. He died the moment he chose to become someone else's husband. The day I was discharged, the sun was bright. As I reached the hospital entrance, I saw a familiar military green Jeep. The next moment, Jocelyn walked out of the hospital doors. The car door flew open, and Ethan rushed over, carefully supporting her by the waist. "Easy now. The doctor said you need to rest?" His voice was so gentle it could have been made of honey, exactly the way he used to talk to me. I stood there, watching the jeep speed away, its exhaust fumes washing over my pale face. He didn't even spare me a single glance. The evening breeze carried a chill. As I pushed open the gate to my house, I saw a tall figure standing at my door from a distance. Ethan was holding several bags of nutritional supplements, with more stacked at his feet: malted milk powder, brown sugar, and canned goods. "Sienna," he strode toward me. "Is your allergy any better?" How ironic. He had ignored me during the day, but now that no one was around, he was putting on a show of deep affection. "Thank you for your concern, big brother. I'm much better." I moved to walk around him and open my door. Ethan grabbed my wrist. "Take these. They'll help you recover." "I don't need." "Elias, something's happened." Jocelyn suddenly burst into the yard, tears streaming down her face. I was reported for selling forged residence permits. Chapter 4, I felt Ethan's hand on my wrist go rigid. "What did you say?" His voice turned sharp and cold. Jocelyn was sobbing hysterically. "I just wanted to earn some extra money for new clothes. Now the investigators are coming to arrest me." A vein throbbed in Ethan's forehead. "I give you my entire monthly salary, and you still go and do something like this?" Jocelyn tugged at his sleeve, stamping her foot. "What do I do now? I'm pregnant, I can't go to jail." The courtyard gate was suddenly kicked open. 3 men wearing red armbands stormed in. "Jocelyn Sommers, you've been reported for illegally selling residence permits. Please come with us." The air froze. Ethan was silent for a long moment, then he spoke. It wasn't her. Everyone's eyes fixed on him. The air hung thick for a few seconds before he said, word by word, "I know about this. It wasn't Jocelyn, it was Sienna Hayes." The world seemed to stop. "What did you say?" My voice trembled. "Say it again." "Who was it?" He avoided my gaze, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It was Sienna Hayes." My voice shook as I tried to speak again, but the investigators had already twisted my arms behind my back. "We have a witness. Please cooperate with our investigation." As they pushed me into the truck, I stared at Ethan. He stood protectively in front of Jocelyn, his uniform immaculate. But he was no longer the man I remembered, the one who would have shielded me with his life during an earthquake. In the small, dark interrogation room, no one listened to my pleas. "Colonel Hawthorne identified you himself." How could it be a lie? The lead investigator slammed a pen down in front of me. "Just confess." After 3 days without food or water, I was sent to a work camp at a coal mine for labor reform. The mine was cold and damp. I carried a heavy basket of coal, each step like walking on knives. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the mine. "It's a cave and run." Before I could react, collapsing rock and coal buried the lower half of my body. Through the searing pain, I heard someone screaming my name, a sound of pure agony. "Sienna, hold on." Was I hallucinating? The man who had abandoned me was now clawing at the rubble with his bare hands, his fingers bloody and raw. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." When Ethan finally pulled me out, his voice was trembling uncontrollably as he repeated my name over and over. "Jocelyn's pregnant, she couldn't have endured this, I had to pin it on you." "Sienna," my hands were tied. "It hurt me more than it hurt you. As soon as the baby is born, I'll bring you home. Wake up, please wake up." "I can't lose you." I wanted to laugh. He was always like this, a lash of the whip followed by a piece of candy. The last thing I felt before losing consciousness was the searing heat of Ethan's tears on my face. When I woke up again, the hospital room was quiet. Ethan was slumped over by the bed, fast asleep. A dark stubble shadowed his chin. The moment I moved, he jerked awake. "Sienna," he threw his arms around me, his eyes red as he desperately sought my lips. "Thank God you're awake, thank God. Big brother." I used all my strength to push him away. "What do you think you're doing?" Chapter 5, Ethan released me abruptly, stumbling back 2 steps as if he'd been burned. "I'm sorry, his throat worked, his voice hoarse. "Jocelyn has been in the hospital these past few days due to fetal movement. I must have gone to the wrong room and mistaken you for her." He turned and fled, his back looking as if he were escaping a fire. I wiped the lingering warmth from my lips, a bitter irony filling me. He was a terrible liar. It was broad daylight. How could he have gone to the wrong room and mistaken one person for another? After a few days, I checked myself out of the hospital. It happened to be an open house day on the base. The moment I stepped into the family compound, I was swarmed by a group of enthusiastic military wives. "Sienna, dear, it's been a while since Ethan passed. You must be so lonely. It's time to move on. I know the perfect man for you. That's right, Chief of Staff Zhang's youngest son, a military academy graduate, and so handsome. I opened my mouth, about to tell them I had already accepted Leo Lawrence's proposal, but I was pushed in front of a young man in a uniform. Look, this is Mr. Zhou. He works at the Research Institute, has a house with all the modern appliances, and earns $3,500 a month. The young man pushed up his glasses, about to speak, when a dark figure charged forward and sent him flying with a single punch. Everyone froze. I looked up and met a pair of bloodshot eyes. 3 buttons on Ethan's uniform were undone, his chest heaving. I appreciate the kind intentions of my sisters-in-law. He spoke one word at a time, his voice as cold as ice. My sister-in-law is under my care. I'd thank you not to trouble yourselves. With that, he grabbed my hand and started pulling me away. It wasn't until we were far from the crowd that I yanked my hand free. Elias Hawthorne, I deliberately emphasized the name. You're the one who's meddling. Ethan's pupils constricted. Technically, you and I have no real connection, I said, smoothing the wrinkled sleeve of my dress. Who I see, who I marry, that is my own business. I turned to leave, but heard a loud thud behind me. Ethan had slammed his fist into a tree trunk. Blood trickled from between his knuckles. I walked away without a backward glance. Late that night, I was woken by a rustling sound. Before I could turn on the light, a searing hot body pressed down on me. The heavy scent of alcohol mixed with the familiar smell of pine hit me as Ethan's lips crushed down on mine. MMPH, he was clearly drunk, his kiss fierce and urgent, as if he wanted to devour me whole. I pushed against him with all my might, but he pinned my wrists above my head. Don't go, Ethan's voice was ragged, and hot tears fell onto my face. Don't go on dates with other men, I'm begging you. I trembled all over, whether from anger or humiliation, I couldn't tell. Ethan, you are Jocelyn Sommers's husband now. I'm not. He pressed his forehead against mine, his voice filled with anguish. Just wait a little longer, it'll be over soon. Get off me, I shot my knee up, and Ethan grunted in pain as he fell off the bed. The noise woke Jocelyn next door. She pushed the door open. What's going on? The light flicked on. I turned my head away, my long hair hiding my bruised and broken lip. Big brother got drunk and went to the wrong room. You should take him back, sister-in-law. Jocelyn's eyes fell on the corner of my bleeding mouth, and her nails dug deep into her palms. But she said nothing. In a soft, frail voice, she helped Ethan to his feet. Elias, let's go back to our room. Ethan stumbled away with her, but at the doorway, he looked back at me one last time. His eyes held the look of a dying animal. I closed the door and slowly slid to the floor. The cut on my lip burned, but the gaping, 1,000-year-old wound in my heart hurt even more. Chapter 6, the next day, just as the sky began to lighten, the sound of a car engine started up in the courtyard. I opened my eyes and listened as Ethan's car drove away. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, my bedroom door was violently kicked open. Crack, a sharp slap struck my face, stinging with a fiery pain. Jocelyn stood by my bed, her eyes filled with venom. Sienna Hayes, you really are a slut. Your own husband is dead, so now you're trying to seduce your brother-in-law? What are you talking about? I clutched my cheek, but then it hit me last night, how utterly laughable. Ethan was my legally wedded husband, the man whose name was on my marriage certificate. And yet, an intimate moment between us was now being treated as an affair, with another woman playing the role of the wronged wife. You've misunderstood. Last night Shut up, Jocelyn suddenly swept the candlestick from my bedside table. Don't think you can seduce another woman's husband just because you have a pretty face. Today, I'll show you who's more important in his heart. The flame leaped onto the curtains, spreading instantly. Are you insane? I jumped out of bed to run, but Jocelyn grabbed my wrist in a death grip. What's the rush? Jocelyn sneered. You think I'm going to die with you? She leaned in close, her voice a cold whisper in my ear. Before I came here, I had someone call Ethan. Who do you think he'll save first? The thick smoke choked me, bringing tears to my eyes. I struggled desperately, but then I heard the sound of urgent footsteps outside. Jocelyn, Sienna, the moment Ethan burst into the fiery room, I had a flashback to our wedding night. He had held me and said, Sienna, remember this. No matter what, you will always be my first choice. But reality was this: he didn't even look at me. He ran straight to Jocelyn, scooped her up, and rushed outside. "Ethan," I reached out a hand, but my path was blocked by a collapsing ceiling beam. As the searing heat scorched my skin and I fell to the floor, I thought I saw him again, the Ethan from years ago, standing backstage at the arts troupe, smiling as he pressed a caramel candy into my hand. Sienna. Sienna, through the biting smell of antiseptic, I struggled to open my eyes. Ethan sat by my bed, a dark stubble covering his chin, with heavy shadows under his eyes. "You just had a skin graft." "Don't move." He reached out to help me, but I flinched away. "A skin graft." My voice was a hoarse whisper of disbelief. Ethan's brow furrowed. "You started a fire and nearly killed Jocelyn. It's just a small skin graft. Why are you getting so hysterical?" I suddenly started to laugh, laughing until tears streamed down my face. "She said I started the fire. She said that and you just believed her. What else was I supposed to do?" He rubbed his temples wearily. "I'm her husband. Who am I supposed to believe if not her?" The word husband was another knife in my heart. I ripped the IV needle from the back of my hand. "Then, what are you doing here?" "Get out." The IV bottle crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Ethan grabbed my bleeding hand. "Younger sister-in-law, calm down. I know you've been wronged, but just wait another 10 months until the baby is born." "Get out." I snatched the pillow and threw it at him. "I never want to see you again." The pillow hit his shoulder with a soft, weightless thud. Ethan stood frozen, his Adam's apple bobbing. Finally, he turned and left. After the door clicked shut, I noticed a box of caramel candies on the bedside table. My favorite kind. I grabbed the box and hurled it against the wall. Candies scattered across the floor, just like the shattered pieces of my heart. Chapter 7, the day I was discharged. The sunlight was so bright it hurt my eyes. As I reached the gate of the family compound, I saw the matchmaker, Mrs. Larkin, waving at me on her tiptoes. "Sienna, I've been waiting for you." "Mrs. Larkin?" I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The burn on my right arm still throbbed with a dull ache. "Colonel Lawrence has made all the arrangements. The boat leaves early tomorrow morning." Mrs. Larkin lowered her voice and pulled a ticket from her pocket. "He specifically said not to bring too much luggage. Everything has been prepared for you on the island." I quickly took a small envelope of cash from my pocket and handed it to her. "Thank you for all your trouble, Mrs. Larkin." "Oh, my dear, Colonel Lawrence already paid my matchmaking fee. This is extra." I pressed the envelope into her hand, a faint smile on my lips. "To celebrate my new life." Mrs. Larkin blinked, then her face broke into a wide grin. "Yes, a celebration is in order when a husband dies, you forget him. The only way is to look forward." She was right. In everyone's eyes, Ethan Hawthorne was long dead. He died in that mission, with that blood-stained insignia. Only I knew that he was alive and well, living in the arms of another woman. Just as I was about to speak, the courtyard gate was kicked open with a loud bang. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face a thundercloud. His uniform was soaked with sweat, a clear sign he had rushed back. "I told you not to set Sienna up with anyone else." He snatched the envelope from Mrs. Larkin's hand. "I will take care of her, and she will not remarry." Mrs. Larkin flinched in fear. "But she already—" "You should head home now, Mrs. Larkin." I interrupted her softly, giving her a pointed look. Mrs. Larkin scurried away, nearly colliding with Jocelyn, who was just entering. Jocelyn looked up and saw Ethan standing protectively in front of me. A dark, predatory look flashed in her eyes. Late that night, as I was packing, my door was suddenly pushed open. Jocelyn, her belly barely showing, sneered at me. "Didn't learn your lesson last time? Still trying to seduce Elias?" I continued folding my clothes without looking up. "I'm leaving tomorrow." "You?" Before I could finish, Jocelyn let out a sharp cry and collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach. "My baby!" Almost simultaneously, Ethan burst in from outside. "Jocelyn!" He didn't even glance at me. He swept Jocelyn into his arms and ran out. I stood frozen, hearing Jocelyn's cries echo down the hallway. "She pushed me." "Elias, our baby." Such clumsy acting. I wanted to laugh, but tasted the salt of my own tears. At the crack of dawn, I was dragging my suitcase to the gate when I ran into Ethan, who was just returning, looking tired and disheveled. He had heavy, dark circles under his eyes, a rough stubble on his chin, and his eyes were bloodshot. "Why do you keep trying to hurt Jocelyn?" he demanded, grabbing my wrist. "I was with her all night. We almost lost the baby. I wrenched my hand free and continued walking in silence. He finally noticed my suitcase. "How did you know I was going to send you away? You even have your luggage packed." I stopped. "Send me away?" His handsome face was etched with exhaustion, but his voice was cold. "Yes, Jocelyn's pregnancy is unstable, and she doesn't want to see you right now. You'll go stay with your parents for a while." He tried to take my suitcase. "I'll take you to the station." "That's not necessary." I pulled the suitcase back. "I can go by myself." But Ethan insisted on following me, as if he was afraid I wouldn't leave. He walked me all the way to the bus station. "You just stay with your parents for a while. Once the baby is born, I'll come and get you." "I won't go in with you. You can buy your own ticket. Jocelyn is still waiting for me at the hospital." After a few more instructions, he turned and walked away quickly. I stood in front of the ticket counter and let out a small laugh. "Ethan Hawthorne, you can spend the rest of your life taking care of your precious Jocelyn." I watched the military green Jeep disappear into the morning mist. Then, I slowly turned and walked in the opposite direction. A bus was waiting there, one that would take me to the port. Leo Lawrence was waiting for me. A new life was waiting for me. In the morning light, I looked back one last time in the direction of the military compound. "Ethan Hawthorne, this time, we will never meet again." Chapter 8 At the port, as soon as I stepped off the bus with my luggage, I saw a man in a gray coat waving excitedly at me. Sienna, the moment Leo Lawrence saw the woman he had loved for so long, his calm eyes lit up. Ignoring the pile of bags at his own feet, he rushed over to me and took the suitcase from my hand. "Let me help you with that." I wasn't one for dramatics. Besides, Leo and I were going to be husband and wife, spending the rest of our lives together. I had to get used to him. So I handed him the suitcase and offered a small smile. "Thank you." The sound of my voice, as clear as a mountain spring, seemed to make his ears flush the color of a ripe tomato. He scratched his head, embarrassed, and grinned. "Don't mention it. We're going to be family after all." Family. I paused, looking up at the man beside me, really studying him for the first time in years. From the matchmaker's enthusiastic descriptions and the gossip from old high school classmates, one thing was clear. Leo Lawrence was very much in love with me. So in love that he had rejected every single woman his parents had tried to set him up with over the years. So in love that he had politely turned down all the bold women who had pursued him. Even during the years of my widowhood, he had ignored the gossip and waited steadfastly for me, waiting for me to say yes. Even now, as I looked at him, he was sneaking glances at me from the corner of his eye. The moment our gazes met, he would quickly look away, pretending to be nonchalant, but the deep red of his cheeks betrayed him completely. The amusing sight made me chuckle, but then a thought struck me. This time I spoke his name first, my expression serious. "Leo, there's something I need to tell you." Since I had decided to give up on Ethan, to forget the past and make a clean break, and to build a good life with the man before me, I had to offer him the same courtesy. I needed to be clear about everything to avoid any misunderstandings in the future. Seeing my serious expression, Leo mirrored it, his own face becoming earnest. "Go on." I took a deep breath. "You probably know about my past. How could he not? From the first moment he fell for me, he had been quietly paying attention. That was why he had sent a matchmaker to my door the instant I became a widow, letting the entire family compound know that I was his and could only be his." Leo nodded quickly. I smiled. "But what I need to tell you is, my husband never died." Buzz, the word sent a shockwave through Leo's mind. It went completely blank. The bags in his hands fell to the ground unnoticed, as a storm raged within him. What did she mean? Her husband was still alive. Did this mean his years of longing were about to be shattered again? He hadn't even had a chance to properly tell her of the deep love he had been harboring all these years. Was he going to lose her again? Just as Leo's mind was reeling, a warm, soft hand gently took his. A soothing voice sounded in his ear. "But don't worry, I'm not going back to him. Our marriage ended the moment he died. Besides, he's now the husband of the other Mrs. Hawthorne." "WH what?" The successive bombshells left Leo stunned, unable to recover for a long time. So, I told him everything: how Ethan had impersonated his own brother, slept with his sister-in-law, and planned to return to me only after their child was born. "Even if he comes looking for me one day, you don't have to worry. He has no evidence to prove he's Ethan Hawthorne." Chapter 9, thinking about it, I actually had Ethan himself to thank for cutting off his own escape route. Back when I first heard the devastating news of his death, I had a complete nervous breakdown. I would frequently mistake his brother-in-law, who he was impersonating, for my own husband, to make me give up for good. Or for whatever reason, Ethan had made a solemn vow in front of the entire family compound that he would forever be Jocelyn's husband. He even burned all the evidence that could prove he was Ethan Hawthorne as an offering to his dead self, claiming it was to help me accept that my husband was truly gone. So now, there was no one and no evidence that could prove he was Ethan Hawthorne. If he were to insist he was Ethan, he would either be sent to a psychiatric hospital for being delusional, or, if proven, be thrown in prison by the disciplinary committee for fraud. Either path was a dead end, and for me, it meant my past was well and truly behind me. Hearing this, the heart that had been lodged in Leo's throat finally settled back into his chest. In his memory, Ethan had been a decisive and meticulous man. He never imagined Ethan would one day shoot himself in the foot over matters of the heart. But this was good. Now he could never take Sienna back. From now on, Sienna would be his and only his. At this thought, the smile he had suppressed returned, and the hand that held mine squeezed back, holding it tight. Leo, since I've decided to marry you and live a good life, it means I'm leaving the past behind. I won't look back for anyone. But I also hope that after we're married, you won't do anything to betray me. You know me. If you do, I will leave you forever and make you. Before I could finish, Leo pulled me into a fierce hug. The scent of soap and sunshine enveloped me, and I felt an unexpected sense of relaxation. Sienna, I've loved you for 10 years. I've waited for you for so long. I know better than anyone how hard it was to get you to say yes. And I know better than anyone how much courage it took for you to cut ties with the past and start a new relationship. The only thing I can do is love you with all my heart, warm you, and never, ever hurt you. I know you might not believe these words right now. After all, you're just starting to accept me to get to know me. Your heart won't be entirely mine right away, but we have a whole lifetime ahead of us, and I will prove to you how much I love you. Throughout it all, Leo's voice was calm, yet exceptionally firm. It was like a large, warm hand covering my cold, dead heart, slowly warming it, coaxing green shoots to sprout from barren ground once more. My eyes welled up unexpectedly. I said nothing, but raised my hands and slowly placed them on his back, gently pulling him closer. Just then, the ship at the port sounded its horn, urging the remaining passengers on the shore to board. Leo was the first to release me from the hug. He picked up our luggage with one hand and took my hand with the other, smiling at me. Let's go, with him to a new life. Okay, I smiled back at him. Together, we joined the stream of passengers boarding the ship. Another blast of the horn, and black smoke billowed from the ship's funnel, like a giant, invisible hand waving goodbye to the port. The passengers on deck crowded the railings, waving goodbye to their loved ones on the shore with reluctant faces. Only Leo and I stood huddled together, silently watching the port grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared from view completely. Chapter 10, at the hospital, after dropping me off at the station, Ethan had rushed back. Ever since Jocelyn had been pushed by me, her pregnancy had been unstable, and she had become incredibly needy, unable to be apart from him for a moment. If she didn't see him, she would break down into wretched sobs until she fainted. Thinking of this, he quickened his pace. Sure enough, when Jocelyn woke up in her hospital room and didn't see her husband, tears immediately streamed down her face. Elias, where are you?" When there was no answer, panic welled up inside her, and a sharp pain shot through her stomach. Ignoring it, she dragged her weak body out of bed to go find him. The next moment, the man she had been calling for pushed the door open and strode towards her. Jocelyn, seeing her about to collapse, Ethan's heart clenched, and he lunged forward to catch her. Careful, once in his familiar embrace, all of Jocelyn's pent-up fear and insecurity burst forth. She clutched his shirt tightly and looked up at him. As she did, tears fell, splashing onto the floor. I thought you had abandoned me." Ethan's strange behavior towards Sienna these past few days, coupled with Sienna's subtle provocations, had filled Jocelyn with a sense of crisis. Having watched her own mother lose a family power struggle and then suffer for over a decade, she knew this feeling all too well. That's why she was so terrified. terrified that Ethan would abandon her, just as her father had abandoned her mother. Ethan had been too good to her over the years. He had not only pulled her out of the mud, but had also given her a life of comfort she had never dared to dream of. And after he returned from the battlefield, he had loved her with a mad passion, pulling her into bed night after night. He loved her so much that she could no longer live without him. She couldn't bear to imagine how she would survive if he left her. That was why she had used every means possible to prevent that from happening. But when she woke from her daze on the hospital bed, he was nowhere in sight. Ethan's adjutant had simply told her that he had gone home to take Sienna to her parents' house. Jocelyn waited and waited, but he never came back. She was terrified that something might happen between him and Sienna on the road. If something did happen, what would become of her and the baby in her belly? Thankfully, he had returned in time. Seeing the state she was in, the words Ethan had wanted to say dissolved into a sigh. He raised his hand and gently wiped away her tears with his rough fingertips. After he had calmed her down and settled her back in bed, Ethan finally explained why he was late. He had originally planned to take me directly to my parents' house, but worried about Jocelyn, he had compromised by just dropping me at the train station. Then he had rushed back to the hospital, but his car had broken down on the way. Not wanting her to worry, he had left the car with his adjutant and run the rest of the way. It was only then that Jocelyn noticed the beads of sweat on his forehead and his sweat-drenched shirt. She was both touched and heartbroken. She quickly took a handkerchief to wipe his face, then, as if remembering something, she bit her lip. "But Elias, isn't it a bit risky to leave your sister-in-law at the station by herself? I've heard it's not very safe there lately. What if something happened?" Her words were full of concern, but in her heart, she wickedly hoped that something would happen to me. If something did happen to me, then I could never come back to seduce her husband. Hearing this, Ethan's body stiffened, but he quickly shook his head and reassured her. "It'll be fine. She's an adult. She can take care of herself." Ethan thought about how, all these years without him, I had managed just fine. It was just a trip back to my parents' house. What could possibly happen? Besides, he had already called my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, and told them to pick me up from the station. Chapter 11 that evening, as usual, Ethan lay beside Jocelyn, holding her in his arms and gently stroking her belly. The topic of the baby led them into a quiet conversation. Somehow, Jocelyn grew curious about the baby's appearance. "Elias, do you think the baby will look more like you or me?" The hand stroking her belly paused for a moment before he said, "It can look like anyone, as long as you're happy." Though he said that, my image suddenly appeared in Ethan's mind. If he and I were to have a child, who would it look like? If it were a girl, he would want her to look more like me, so he could dote on both of them. If it were a boy, he would want him to look more like him, so he could teach his son how to protect me. The thought of their children sweetly clinging to them brought a gentle expression to Ethan's usually stern face, and a smile unconsciously graced his lips. Seeing his tender look, Jocelyn's body softened, and she snuggled deeper into his embrace, her soft hand slowly sliding under his shirt. "Elias?" Ethan looked down to see Jocelyn gazing at him with sultry eyes, every movement exuding an alluring invitation that made his stomach tight. But Ethan knew his mission had been completed the moment Jocelyn's pregnancy was announced. He was only staying by her side now to ensure she delivered the child safely. He had prepared himself to return to his own family and would not touch his brother's wife again. With this thought, he took a deep breath, trying to suppress the strange stirrings in his body, and was about to pull Jocelyn's hand away. But after becoming pregnant, Jocelyn's desires had grown stronger, and she was not about to let him go so easily. Thinking he was just being reserved, she took the initiative and offered her own lush red lips to his. Elias were husband and wife, and the pregnancy is stable now. "It's okay?" Thud the words, husband and wife, struck Ethan's heart like a heavy hammer, jolting him back to his senses. That's right. He had been so focused on returning to his little home with Sienna that he had forgotten his current identity. He was still Elias Hawthorne. He was still Jocelyn Sommers's husband. He still had to fulfill his duties as her husband. At this thought, his eyes darkened. He suddenly kissed Jocelyn, pulling her to face him under the covers. He cupped her face with one hand, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he kissed her, sometimes lightly, sometimes deeply. His other hand supported her waist, carefully protecting the child in her womb. Jocelyn's gaze was hazy, her smooth, fair chin tilted up slightly. Her hands rested limply on his shoulders, completely at his mercy. Outside, the rain grew heavier, its drumming audible even through the glass. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, thunder boomed, and the downpour was torrential. A cool, damp air seeped in through a window that hadn't been fully closed. A large hand yanked the hospital room curtains shut. Only a single wall lamp remained on, casting flickering shadows of two entangled figures. Be gentle. The next morning, the night-long rain finally stopped. The air was filled with the fresh scent of earth mixed with grass. At the same time, sunlight filtered through the leaves of a large tree, shining on the lounge chair below and the swing hanging from a branch. Rain-beaten flowers lay scattered on the ground. The quiet streets gradually came to life with the ringing of bicycle bells and the shouts of street vendors. This symphony of sounds woke Ethan, who was holding Jocelyn tightly in the hospital bed. He carefully released her, got out of bed, and bent down to pick up the scattered clothes from the floor, tossing them into the laundry basket. He then opened the wardrobe, pulled out a fresh set of clothes, and quietly left. He calculated the time. I should have arrived at my parents' house by now. Last night, because it was late and he was worried I would be tired from the long journey, he had forced himself not to call the Hayes residence. Now that a night had passed, I should be well rested. Thinking this, he hurried to a public phone booth, picked up the receiver, and dialed my parents' number. Ring, ring, the phone rang and rang with no answer, and Ethan's heart sank with each unanswered ring. Just as he was about to hang up and try again, my father's voice suddenly came from the other end. Hello? A flicker of joy lit up Ethan's eyes. He spoke eagerly. Dad, Mr. Hayes, it's me. It's Elias Hawthorne. My father on the other end simply grunted. What do you want? Chapter 12, hearing Mr. Hayes's distant tone, Ethan was momentarily taken aback. In his memory, my father had always been pleased with him as a son-in-law, and he had been warm and welcoming to his family as well. Not cold and detached like this. He tightened his grip on the receiver, feeling that my father's attitude was strange, though he couldn't pinpoint why. On the other end, my father, hearing only silence, was about to hang up. Ethan snapped back to reality and quickly asked if I had arrived home and if I was available to talk. My father paused, and then my mother snatched the phone, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You control everything, don't you? You've even managed Sienna's entire life. How could you not know whether she's back or not? Ethan froze, finally remembering why my family was so displeased with him. When I became a widow, my parents, fearing I would suffer alone, had wanted to take me back home and find me a good man to remarry. But Ethan wasn't dead, so how could he possibly watch his own wife marry someone else? At the time, he had desperately blocked the doorway, preventing my family from entering. He had even ignored all the gossip and knelt before them, swearing a solemn oath to the heavens that he would take good care of me. But my family didn't believe a word he said and insisted on taking me away. In the end, he had to ask a high-ranking official to intervene and resolve the matter. Since then, my family had never shown him, or the Hawthorns, a friendly face. Ethan knew he was in the wrong and planned to go to their house and beg for forgiveness after Jocelyn's baby was born. After hanging up, my mother looked at my father, her face grim. How does he have the nerve to ask us about Sienna? My parents had known for a while that the person on the other end of the line was Ethan. After all, the matchmaker had told them about my plans to marry Leo Lawrence and move to the island. The reason they hadn't told Ethan or the Hawthorns was because Ethan had deceived them first. They were simply returning the favor. My father's expression was equally dark, but he patiently tried to console his wife. Don't worry, I won't let him get away with this. After her pregnancy stabilized, Ethan brought Jocelyn home. The day she returned happened to be Margaret Hawthorne's 60th birthday. With one son a decorated war hero and the other a high-ranking colonel, the Hawthorne family's status had risen considerably. On the day of the birthday banquet, their home was bustling with guests. Even Ethan's commanding officer, the senior commissar, came to pay his respects. For a moment, Margaret was the picture of prestige. She glanced around the room, which was filled with family members. On her left were Ethan and her eldest daughter-in-law, Jocelyn. On her right were her youngest daughter and son-in-law, who had traveled all the way from the capital for the occasion. Only one seat at the very end of the table was empty. That seat was meant for her second daughter-in-law me. Margaret had wanted Ethan to bring me back for the occasion. But Ethan had used the excuse of the long journey, the fear of tiring me out, and the worry that I would cause a scene and harm Jocelyn to successfully dissuade her. The Hawthorne family had always struggled with fertility, and now that Jocelyn was finally pregnant, Margaret didn't want anything to happen. It was just a shame that not everyone could be there for the birthday celebration. With a knock at the door, Margaret stood up. "Let's go, it's time for the banquet to begin." Jocelyn quickly rose to help her, but Margaret waved her hand. "No need, I can walk on my own. You're carrying a child now. Let Elias look after you." Jocelyn blushed and glanced at Ethan, who had come to support her. The moment their eyes met, she quickly looked away. Seeing the affectionate couple, the guests showered them with praise. Only Ethan's parents, who knew the truth, managed forced smiles. The Hawthorne courtyard was decorated with lanterns and colorful streamers. A television, which Ethan had specially bought, was playing an amusing movie, while on a nearby stage, performers were acting out a drama that Margaret loved. As fireworks bloomed in the night sky, the banquet reached its climax. Ethan and Jocelyn, one on each side, supported Margaret as she walked to the main table, where a large, peach-shaped birthday cake, specially ordered by Jocelyn from a Western-style bakery, sat waiting. Amid the chorus of well wishes, Margaret was about to pick up the knife to cut the cake. But the next moment, the closed main gate was suddenly kicked open. My family, their faces grim, stormed in. Elias Hawthorne, the lively atmosphere came to an abrupt halt. Everyone stared at the newcomers, confused. It was Ethan, whose name had been called, whose expression changed. He didn't know why my family had traveled all this way to the Hawthorne residence, and he didn't see me among them. Confusion, bewilderment, panic, and unease wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. Just as he was about to step forward, Margaret forced a smile and went to take my mother's arm. "Oh, my dear in-laws, what brings you here?" My mother completely ignored Margaret's attempt at friendliness and shoved her away. "Don't you dare call me your in-law," Chapter 13. "Mom," Ethan rushed forward to steady his mother, his face darkening. "What do you think you're doing?" My mother was even more furious. "What are we doing? I should be asking what your family is doing. You swore in front of everyone that you would take good care of my daughter. How long has it been? And look what you've done to her." Sensing a juicy scandal, the guests lingered, forming a curious circle. The Hawthornes, on the other hand, exchanged alarmed glances and tried to usher my family inside. But my father, now enraged, had my other relatives block their path and roared, "Go inside, why should we? You feel shame now, do you? Where was your shame when you were hurting my daughter?" "Elias Hawthorne, I want to ask you, was it you who made my daughter take the fall for your wife's black market dealings? Was it you who let my daughter get nearly crushed to death in a collapsed mine? And when your wife set a fire to kill my daughter, was it you who stood by and did nothing?" With each explosive secret my father revealed, a wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the crowd. Margaret, who had known nothing of these truths, turned pale and looked at her son in disbelief. "Elias, is any of this true?" "Of course it's true." Before Ethan could answer, my mother flung a stack of pre-printed papers into the air. The white sheets fluttered down like a snowstorm, landing in the hands of the stunned guests. As they read the contents, their expressions changed dramatically. "My God, is this all true? The Hawthornes are monsters. How could they treat a widow like that? Sienna Hayes was just a widow, and they forced her to take the blame for her sister-in-law. They were trying to kill her." Hearing these words, all of my mother's pent-up grief finally erupted. She collapsed to the ground in a heap, sobbing uncontrollably, her words a torrent of blood and tears. "You have no conscience, your family has no conscience, you've ruined my beautiful daughter. If you couldn't take care of her, why didn't you let us take her back? My poor, poor daughter." The scene descended into chaos. Accusations, sobs, and curses rained down like slaps across Margaret Hawthorne's face. Unable to bear it any longer, she clutched her chest, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. "Mom, Mom," in the midst of the turmoil, Ethan's commanding officer, the senior commissar, stepped forward to take control. He asked my family what exactly they wanted. Helped to her feet by her nephew, my mother wiped her tears and made a heart-wrenching decision. "I want my daughter, Sienna Hayes, to sever all ties with the Hawthorne family, crack a bolt of lightning, followed by a deafening clap of thunder, split the sky, illuminating the shocked faces in the courtyard. Ethan's face, in particular, turned deathly pale, as if all the life had been drained from him in that instant. What had he just heard? They wanted Sienna to cut all ties with the Hawthorne family, no? Absolutely not. Jocelyn's baby would be born soon. He was so close to fulfilling his brother's last wish. He was so close to being able to return to Sienna as Ethan Hawthorne and tell her the whole truth. They were so close to getting back to their happy life. And now, with his plan so near completion, my family was forcing his wife, his Sienna, to leave him. He would not allow it, no. But Ethan's protest was a feeble whisper against my family's iron will. Ever since they had learned the truth about him, my parents had developed a deep-seated hatred for him and the entire Hawthorne family. They had once thought their daughter would live a happy life after marrying into his family, but instead, she had fallen into a den of wolves. If they had known, they would have died before letting me marry him. But at least now, they could make amends and cut their losses. In a way, they were grateful for what Ethan had done. It gave them the perfect reason my widowhood to sever all ties with the Hawthorns. It was much easier than a military divorce, and it left Ethan and his family with no grounds to ever bother me again. Unless he exposed himself. And if he did that, he would be sent to prison. Either way, it was a fate worse than death for him. It was with this in mind that my family had chosen Margaret's birthday banquet to force his hand in public. If he dared to admit he was Ethan Hawthorne, they could kill two birds with one stone and drag him and his entire family down to hell with him. Chapter 14, What right do you have to object, Elias Hawthorne? My mother spat out the last 3 words, her voice heavy with meaning, as if to remind Ethan of his current identity. If you want to talk about mourning, my daughter mourned for your brother for nearly 2 years. If you want to talk about suffering, my daughter has endured more than her fair share. Even if she owed you anything, she's more than paid her debt. Besides, if anyone has the right to object, it should be my daughter's husband, your brother, Ethan Hawthorne. You're just her brother-in-law, a complete outsider with no relation to her. What are you objecting to? No, that's not it. I am Ethan Hawthorne. Boom, another clap of thunder echoed, and the chaotic scene fell silent. Everyone stared at Ethan in disbelief, their mouths agape. Did they hear him correctly? What did he just say? He said he was Ethan Hawthorne. What in the world? Jocelyn, standing nearby, was frozen in shock, the pain in her stomach completely forgotten. She grabbed Ethan's arm, ignoring everything else. Elias, what nonsense are you talking? That's right. Even if you want to keep your sister-in-law, you shouldn't be saying such crazy things. Aren't you afraid your brother will come back to haunt you at night? Exactly, Elias. You must have lost your mind. My mother watched the man who was so desperate to expose himself and sneered. What proof do you have that you're Ethan Hawthorne? We all saw Ethan's body with our own eyes. We saw his coffin being buried. That's right, you can't just say things like that. Elias Hawthorne, this is no joking matter. Ethan stood his ground, his hands clenched into fists, his face a mask of conflict and anguish. After a long moment, he looked up again, his voice firm and resolute. I am Ethan Hawthorne, not Elias Hawthorne. The one who died that day was my brother, not me. Ethan had overestimated himself. He had planned to wait until Jocelyn's baby was born before revealing the truth. But now, they were trying to force his wife, his Sienna, away from him. They were closing in, leaving him cornered and desperate. He couldn't lose Sienna. As for Jocelyn, he had been with her for years and had given her a child. Even without him, she would be able to live on. Crash, the thunder roared as a torrential downpour began, the rain drumming so loudly against the canopy that it was hard to hear the man's voice in the crowd. But Jocelyn, standing right next to him, heard every word clearly. Her mind went blank, as if struck by lightning. She shook her head in disbelief, stumbling backward until her knees hit the sharp corner of a mahogany table, sending her sprawling to the ground. Elias, you're joking, right? The husband she had shared a bed with for 2 years, the husband who had whispered words of love as he made love to her time and time again, was now standing in front of a crowd, coldly revealing a truth that shattered her world. He wasn't her husband at all. He was her brother-in-law, the husband of Sienna Hayes, the woman she despised most. She trembled as she looked up at him. You're joking with me, right? Jocelyn stared at Ethan's face, but under the flickering lights, it seemed to distort and blur. All the questions that had been nagging at her suddenly had answers. The man whose personality and tastes had changed so drastically. the man who constantly showed concern for his widowed sister-in-law, even chasing away her potential suitors. The man who, in bed, would look at her with such deep affection, yet it always felt as if he were looking through her at someone else. The man who was always the first to rush to Sienna's side when she was hurt. The man who drunkenly stumbled into Sienna's room. Finally, everything made sense. The chandelier swayed in the storm, and a broken sob escaped Jocelyn's lips. The sound grew louder and louder, a desperate, tragic cry, just like Sienna's when she had learned of her husband's death 2 years ago. The grief of losing her husband, 2 years late, finally hit her. Unable to bear the shock, her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. A pool of blood slowly spread beneath her, staining her white dress a horrifying crimson. Blood, there's so much blood. She's having a miscarriage, quick. Call for a car. Chapter 15. The chaos finally subsided with Jocelyn's collapse. After a night of emergency surgery, Jocelyn survived, but the child in her womb did not. Margaret Hawthorne slapped Ethan across the face, her voice filled with anguish. You are a complete fool. If only Ethan had held on a little longer, just a few more months, Jocelyn's child would have been born, providing an heir for the Hawthorne family. But he had chosen that day to reveal his secret, not only costing the family a grandchild, but also bringing immense shame upon them all. The entire city of Cloudcroft now knew that the younger Hawthorne son had impersonated his brother to sleep with his widowed sister-in-law. Now, without any further pressure from my family, the senior commissar had directly intervened, ruling that all ties between me and the Hawthorne family were to be severed. And because the scandal was so great, Ethan's own position as colonel was revoked. Losing so much in one fell swoop, how could Margaret not be furious? She raised her hand to strike him again. But Ethan stood like a soulless puppet, unresponsive to her blows and curses. Finally, a nurse came out and stopped them, announcing that the patient inside was awake and asking who would go in to see her. Ethan finally stirred, his voice hoarse. I'll go. After all, Jocelyn was an innocent victim in all this. He owed her, and he would do his best to make it up to her. Ignoring his mother's frantic shouts from behind, he pushed open the door to Jocelyn's room. The moment the door closed, the clamor from outside was shut out. Ethan looked toward the bed and saw a pale woman with empty, hollow eyes. He clenched his fists and walked toward her, sitting down by her bedside. I've wronged you. Name your compensation, and I'll give you whatever you want. Compensation. After a long silence, Jocelyn finally showed a reaction. She slowly turned her head to look at him, at this man with bloodshot eyes, a stubbled chin, and a look of utter defeat. Her own eyes were filled with a complex mix of emotions. How could he possibly compensate her? She had spent day and night longing for her husband's return, day and night making love with him, and then, filled with joy, she had conceived a child that carried both their blood. Everything had been so perfect, but then he had shattered her beautiful dream, telling her it was all a lie, a fabrication to save her from the pain of widowhood and to give her a reason to live. Now, the lie was exposed. Her husband was gone, her child was gone, and her reputation was ruined. She had nothing left. How could he possibly compensate her? Jocelyn's knuckles turned white as she clutched the blanket, the words forced from her throat sounding as if they had been scraped by sandpaper. Ethan Hawthorne, the best thing you could have done was not to compensate me, but to never have shattered this lie. To let her continue living in her beautiful dream, not to suffer this heart-wrenching pain over and over again. Ethan closed his eyes, his voice even more feeble. I? Any words he could say now seemed pale and meaningless. The clock on the wall ticked on, and the only sound in the room was their breathing. After what felt like an eternity, Jocelyn spoke again. Anything I want? Ethan paused, then said, yes. This time, Jocelyn finally smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. All right then, I want you to marry me. Bang! Ethan shot up from his chair. No, the only person he loved was Sienna. He would only ever recognize her as his wife. He would never marry anyone else. This is absurd. Ask for something else. Absurd? Jocelyn suddenly laughed, her voice dripping with irony. You think this is absurd? Then why didn't you think it was absurd when you arrogantly impersonated your brother and slept with me to have a child? Do you have any idea that because of you, my reputation is completely ruined? I'll never be able to marry again. How am I supposed to live now? Let me tell you, Ethan Hawthorne, for the rest of your life, you can only and you must marry me, Chapter 16 No. Yes, you will. Before Ethan could finish, his mother, who had been eavesdropping at the door, burst in and interrupted him. Margaret was already distraught over losing one son and a daughter-in-law. Now, on the verge of losing a second, she was frantic. Jocelyn's proposal to marry Ethan was, to her, a godsend. Mom, Ethan couldn't believe that even at a time like this, his mother was adding to the chaos. Ethan, our family has already wronged Sienna. We cannot wrong Jocelyn as well. I approve of this. As soon as Jocelyn is discharged, you two will go and get your marriage license. Absolutely not. My wife is Sienna, and only Sienna. Ethan's face darkened completely. He had already hurt Sienna once. He couldn't continue to hurt her, and he certainly couldn't marry someone else. No matter what you think, I only want Sienna. Ethan Hawthorne. Bang! At that moment, the hospital room door was thrown open. A man burst in, panting. Ethan, there's news of Sienna, really? Instantly, Ethan's grim expression vanished, replaced by a flicker of joy. Forgetting everything else, he rushed out of the room. Ethan Hawthorne, you get back here. No matter how loudly his mother shouted after him, Ethan didn't look back once. Down south, on a certain island, I had underestimated my own physical resilience. The 3-day sea voyage had left me seasick for 2 of them, and I spent the 3rd in a drowsy, half-conscious state. From the moment we disembarked until we reached Leo's home, I was carried on his back. It took nearly half a month of bed rest before I regained my strength and could properly take in my new home with Leo. The house was a 2-story building on a hillside, tiled inside and out, and filled with all the necessary furniture and appliances. Fruit trees and vegetable patches surrounded the house. A fenced-off area next to a fish pond housed a flock of chickens, ducks, and geese. And beside the pond, Leo sat on a small stool, dressed in a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, leisurely fishing. When he saw me approaching, he quickly grabbed another small stool for me. How are you feeling? Perhaps it was the change in climate, but these past few days I had no appetite and had lost a lot of weight. Leo was heartbroken, asking around for all sorts of remedies and trying to cook different meals for me every day. Now, I finally had the energy to come downstairs and join him. I nodded and sat down next to him. Much better. The worry that had been weighing on Leo's heart finally lifted. He took my hand and rubbed it, his eyes filled with a hint of regret. I knew I shouldn't have chosen this island for my assignment. Leo was a foreign correspondent for the National News Agency, constantly on the move. This time, he had chosen to be stationed in the south of the country, sending back the latest news to his superiors. He had another reason for choosing the island. I hadn't said yes to him yet. At the time, Leo thought that if I didn't agree, he would go to the farthest place from me, so he wouldn't have to see me and lose control, trying to win me over. But no sooner had he signed the assignment papers than the matchmaker told him I had agreed to marry him. Of the 3 great joys in life, he had just experienced 2 at once. But his joy then was matched only by his regret now. He never expected that coming to the island would make me so ill. I squeezed his hand back and smiled. It's nothing. I have to adapt eventually. Besides, being stationed on this island is your dream. As your fiancé, of course I have to fully support you. Speaking of being his fiancé, Leo pulled me into his arms. Speaking of which, we should start planning our wedding. Because the island we were on was so remote and difficult to access, and since both our parents were not in the best of health, neither of our families could attend the wedding. However, they had still sent generous dowries and betrothal gifts. At the mention of the wedding, I blushed and asked playfully, "Why the sudden talk of a wedding?" Leo chuckled softly and kissed my forehead, his eyes filled with a fiery passion. "Because I want to marry you right away and make you my wife." Chapter 17. This was the wish Leo Lawrence had cherished for the past 25 years. From the first time he saw Sienna Hayes in high school, his heart had no room for anyone else. Unfortunately, at that time, Sienna was completely focused on her studies, with no interest in romance. Every boy who sent her a love letter was brutally rejected. He was both relieved and saddened by this. Relieved that she didn't like anyone else, but sad because he knew it would be incredibly difficult to win her over. But after careful consideration, Leo decided to gather his courage and confess to her. Unfortunately, before he could, they were separated by college entrance exams, heading off to different cities. The next time Leo heard news of Sienna, she was already married to Ethan Hawthorne. That night, a pile of empty wine bottles lay at Leo's feet, but he still hadn't given up on her. He was waiting for an opportunity. And then, he finally heard that Sienna had become a widow. Leo was ecstatic, so much so that he wanted to set off firecrackers on the spot. Without even telling his parents, he immediately sent for a matchmaker to propose on his behalf. Even though Sienna rejected him so many times, he finally got the answer he had been waiting for. At this thought, he held the woman in his arms even tighter. The next morning, Leo and Sienna got into their car and drove along the newly paved road towards the distant port. Because the island was so remote, many supplies had to be brought in by ship. Due to the long journey, the ship could only come once a month. So, the 15th of every month was the day the islanders went to the ship for the market. Leo kept Sienna close, protecting her from the crowds as he carefully guided her onto the ship. Because it had been a long time since the ship had come, it was stocked with a wide variety of goods. You could find almost anything. Shortly after boarding, Leo had already bought a lot of things. Malted milk, osmanthus oil, a new dress, a butterfly brand watch. Almost everything was for Sienna. Seeing him spend so lavishly, Sienna felt a pang of guilt and quickly grabbed his hand. "Leo, that's enough, it's really too much." Leo smiled and held her hand. "But I don't think it's enough. From the moment I fell in love with you, I started saving money, all so I could give you a good life, where you lack for nothing and don't have to envy anyone. Besides, if I don't spend my money on you, who else would I spend it on? And my family has their own money, they even send us some every year." Seeing his persistence, Sienna didn't say anything more. Instead, she bought him a few new outfits and a bicycle to make his travels easier. By the time they left, their pickup truck was so full of things that it could barely fit everything. They ended up tying some of the larger items to the roof of the truck before heading back. A few days later, Sienna and Leo brought gifts to visit the island's renowned wedding officiant and asked him to choose an auspicious date for their wedding. After some calculations, the officiant set their wedding for 1 month later. With the wedding date set, the couple began to busy themselves with preparations. The first thing they did was go to the relevant office to apply for a marriage license. As they both wrote the words, "voluntary marriage," on the application, a strange sense of happiness washed over them. This meant they were one big step closer to becoming husband and wife. After getting the marriage license, they rushed to the civil affairs office. When they signed the marriage certificate, both of them were filled with excitement. Sienna looked at the words "marriage certificate" and found herself thinking back to the day she and Ethan registered their marriage many years ago. Chapter 18. Back then, she had never been in a relationship and was new to the adult world, completely inexperienced with marriage. She had relied entirely on the guidance of the staff and Ethan. As a result, when she received the certificate, she felt no joy, only a sense of uncertainty about the future. What was she supposed to do now? What was her role? She had no idea. But Ethan, thinking she was just nervous, had comforted her, telling her not to worry or be afraid, that he would be there to help her with everything. And he had kept his promise. From their wedding night to navigating her relationship with her mother-in-law, he had been there for her. Perhaps he had been too good to her, making her overly dependent on him. That was why, when she heard the news of his death, all she felt was grief and a deep, dark secret. She had become so accustomed to his care that she couldn't imagine how she would live without him. In a way, Ethan had been her everything back then. That was why she had been so lost, so desperate to end her life. But it was also because of Ethan's death that she had gradually grown and become independent, realizing that she could live and even thrive without a man. But just as Sienna was starting to accept a life of hardship she had never known, she stumbled upon Ethan's secret. The moment she discovered it, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. That was why she had completely given up on him. To get away from him for good, she had agreed to Leo's proposal. Although she would forget the past and do her best to be a good wife after marrying Leo, it was almost impossible for her to feel any excitement or passion for marriage again. But now, Sienna realized she was wrong. Perhaps it was the influence of Leo beside her these past few days, but she now felt a thrill of excitement and a sense of anticipation for their future together. She even started to imagine all the things they would do together. A happy smile graced Sienna's lips as she bent down and wrote her name on the marriage certificate, pressing her thumbprint beside it. Leo was just as excited. Looking at the marriage certificate, he felt a sense of lightheadedness, as if he were dreaming. To check if it was real, he pinched his thigh hard. The sharp pain that shot through him was met with a wide, foolish grin. The sound of his laughter drew Sienna's attention. "What's wrong with you?" Leo smiled back at her sheepishly. "Nothing. I just thought I was dreaming, so I pinched myself." His antics made Sienna burst out laughing. Soon, at the staff's direction, they sat down in front of a red backdrop for their wedding photo. "Good, good. A little closer, you two." Following the photographer's instructions, Sienna and Leo leaned in close, their cheeks touching as they smiled at the camera. Leo's warm breath on Sienna's face brought a faint blush to her cheeks. She fiddled with the hem of her dress, too shy to look at him. Because they were so close, Leo could clearly hear Sienna's heartbeat, its rapid thumping making him sit up straight with nervousness. Sweat beaded on his back, and his hands were clenched into fists in his pockets. He tried to calm down, but his heart was racing like a frightened deer. "Okay, look at the camera," click a flash of white light, and a brand new wedding photo was affixed to their marriage certificates, stamped with the seal of the Civil Affairs Office. The newlyweds, Sienna and Leo, thanked the staff as they took their certificates, handing over a bag of celebratory candies in return. Leo held the new certificate, his fingers tracing over their photo. The spot where his fingers touched the paper felt as if it were coated in sweet candy, the sweet scent filling his nose and sparking a wave of joy throughout his body. The word couple on the certificate seemed to form a giant character for joy in his mind. The certificate number became a burst of fireworks in his irises, and he could almost hear the whole world cheering for his successful marriage. The official seal, like a blooming rose, was unconsciously caressed by his fingertips. The rough texture of the household register paper made his skin tingle, and his heart leaped with excitement. Finally, his finger landed on the date at the bottom, April 20th. This was the day he and Sienna got married, the starting point of their happy life. He had finally won the heart of the woman he loved. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the overwhelming emotions, but the wetness in the corners of his eyes betrayed his inner excitement and joy. Chapter 19, but the excitement was like a gushing spring that couldn't be contained. Leo could no longer hold back. He swept Sienna into his arms and spun her around in circles. "I'm married, I have a wife. Ah, what are you doing?" Suddenly lifted into the air, Sienna let out a startled cry. Leo was spinning so fast that she reflexively threw her arms around his neck and playfully tapped his shoulder. "I'm so happy, Sienna, I finally married you, you're finally my wife." The more he spoke, the more excited he became, drawing the attention of passers-by. Hearing Leo's words, several other newlywed couples nearby started laughing, their eyes filled with blessings. Sienna looked down at him and saw her own reflection in his eyes, which were overflowing with a love so intense it couldn't be contained. Her heart pounded, and a blush spread across her face. She lowered her head slightly, a smile blooming on her lips. She was happy too, so happy to have been blessed by fate once more to marry a man who truly loved her. Night fell, the earth bathed in moonlight. Stars twinkled in the vast sky, emitting a faint, enchanting glow. The September evening breeze rustled through the branches, coaxing late-blooming flowers to quietly open. Tonight was their wedding night. Sienna had already prepared herself and was lying in bed. It was Leo who was exceptionally nervous. He sat on the edge of the bed, unable to meet her gaze. Finally, he took a few deep breaths as if he had made a momentous decision and turned to look at her. "Sienna, maybe we should wait until our wedding day?" After the initial euphoria of getting the marriage certificate wore off, a wave of nervousness, mixed with a hint of fear, washed over Leo. He was afraid that this was all just a dream. But the next moment, a pair of soft, delicate hands wrapped around his neck, and the scent of flowers filled the air as Sienna moved closer. "But Leo, we're already married. And I told you, my heart belongs only to you. I will only love you, only be yours. Don't you want to have me?" Leo stared at her, mesmerized by her seductive invitation. Then his eyes darkened. He flipped her over, pinning her beneath him. "Of course I want to have you." Leo captured one of Sienna's hands, their fingers intertwining as he pressed it above her head, planting soft, scattered kisses on the corners of her lips. Her black hair flowed like a river across the pillow, a stark contrast against the soft white, her free hand clutching the bedsheet so tightly that the knuckles of her curled fingers stood out beautifully. The bedroom curtains were drawn tight, leaving only a single wall lamp on. The dim, yellow light filled the room, casting flickering shadows of two tightly entangled figures. A night of passionate lovemaking lasted until dawn. After crossing that final threshold, Sienna and Leo's bond grew even stronger, becoming as inseparable as glue. At dawn, he would place a gentle kiss on her forehead. At dusk, returning from work, he would bring her a bouquet of fresh wildflowers he had picked on his way. She, in turn, would hug him as he left for the day, tucking a few candies and a hard-boiled egg into his pocket, reminding him to eat if he got hungry. At night, she would leave a light on in the living room, keep his dinner warm on the stove, and sit there, knitting a sweater and watching TV, waiting for him to come home. In their free time, he would take her for rides on his bicycle along the coastal road, stopping now and then to feel the sea breeze and collect seashells. Finally, as time went on, their wedding day arrived. Since Sienna and Leo were already living together and neither of them liked a lot of fuss, they kept the wedding simple. On the day of the wedding, amidst the sound of firecrackers, Leo rode a new bicycle, decorated with red ribbons and a red cloth on the back seat, with Sienna, her face hidden behind a red veil, on a designated route around the area. The road was lined with guests, and amidst their cheers and blessings, the best man and maid of honor tossed handfuls of candy, a symbol of their sweet love, into the air. Finally, surrounded by the crowd, Leo parked the bicycle, lifted his new bride from the back seat, and carried her over a basin of fire into the main hall. Fireworks exploded in the sky once more, and from the distant port came the sound of a ship's horn, announcing its arrival. Chapter 20, a stream of passengers poured off the ship and onto the port. Among them was Ethan Hawthorne, on a desperate search for his wife. Ever since he learned that Sienna hadn't gone to her parents' house, but had simply vanished, Ethan had been searching for her like a madman. Finally, after a month, he found a trace of her and learned that she had come to the island. He was ecstatic and immediately tried to buy a ticket to follow her. But he was informed by the relevant authorities that due to the island's special nature, he would have to go through a rigorous screening process. On top of that, tickets were hard to come by. It wasn't until today that he finally managed to set foot on the island. But once he arrived, Ethan realized the island was huge. He had no idea where Sienna had gone, and finding her would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But the word "give up" was not in Ethan's vocabulary. He decided to ask the islanders for information while following any useful leads. With this in mind, Ethan quickened his pace towards the town in the distance. As the bus he was on made its way up the mountain, it suddenly stopped. The passengers swarmed off the bus, excitedly running towards a wedding celebration not far away. Ethan hadn't planned on getting off, but a kind-hearted passenger pulled him along. "Hey, what are you still doing sitting there? Hurry up and get some wedding candy for good luck." Before Ethan could react, he was pulled into the crowd. A shower of candy rained down, and just then, the wedding ceremony in the house reached its climax. The groom was about to lift the bride's red veil and kiss her amidst the cheers of the guests. Urged on by the crowd, the groom slowly turned the bride to face him. The curious onlookers surged forward, and Ethan was pushed along with them to the front. He gradually got a clearer view of the bride. The first thing that caught his eye was her elegant red dress, its hem flowing like a river, accentuating her slender waist. For some reason, Ethan felt a strange sense of familiarity with the bride's figure. Then, the groom raised his hands and slowly lifted the veil. The first thing the crowd saw was the bride's long, elegant neck, her hair swept up in a high bun, and the sparkling pearl earrings that adorned her ears. Finally, the bride's exquisite, picture-perfect face was revealed the moment Sienna's face appeared before Ethan. He heard a clap of thunder explode in his ears, and his mind went completely blank. It was her. It was Sienna, the woman he had been thinking of day and night. The woman he had been searching for like a madman. A flood of images flashed through Sienna's mind. The overwhelming love she had once shown him, her kneeling before his coffin, crying and wanting to join him in death, his countless nights of regret and torment. And now, here she was, standing before him, alive and well when Sienna disappeared. He had truly gone mad. He had knelt at the Hayes family's door countless times, been doused with cold water by them countless times, and been slapped and dragged away by his mother countless times. But he had remained unmoved. He had begged and pleaded, not for their forgiveness, but just for them to tell him where Sienna had gone. But even after he collapsed in the rain from a high fever, the Hayes family's door had never opened. Still, Ethan refused to give up. In the end, he had even swallowed his pride and sought help from his former rivals, begging them to help him find Sienna. And now, he had finally found her. But he had never, ever imagined that his Sienna would be another man's bride. Why had things turned out this way? He had already gathered from the Hayes family's reactions that Sienna had known his secret for a long time, which was why she had left in anger. But they had been husband and wife for so long. And she had loved him so much. Why would she suddenly marry another man? Had he gone too far? Was she doing this out of spite? Ethan's mind was in a complete turmoil. He couldn't hear or see anything clearly. Chapter 21, seeing that the man was about to kiss Sienna's luscious red lips, Ethan lost all control. He frantically tried to break free from the dense crowd, pushing with all his might to get to her, completely ignoring the stunned looks of the other guests. "No, don't," but his voice was instantly drowned out by the surrounding clamor. Ethan grew more and more terrified, his voice becoming hoarse. A single thought screamed in his mind: he couldn't let that man kiss her. They couldn't get married. She was his. He would do whatever it took. Pay any price he had to get Sienna back. He had to tell her how much he had missed her during her absence. He had to tell her the truth about everything. He had to tell her that it was all over, that he could come back to her, that they could go back to their own lives. He had to tell her that from now on, he would protect her and never let her get hurt again. However, just as Ethan was about to burst out of the crowd, two men in green military uniforms suddenly blocked his path. "Sorry, you can't go in." One of the soldiers held out his hand, his tone polite but firm. Ethan ignored him, trying to push the soldier's hand away, his own voice tight with suppressed urgency. "Get out of my way, I need to see Sienna Hayes, she's my wife." The two soldiers froze, exchanging confused glances. Sienna Hayes was his wife. But just a short while ago, their young master had told them that Sienna was their young mistress. And the young mistress's former husband had died in the line of duty. Even if he wanted to claim a connection, why would he bring up a dead man? One of the bodyguards turned back to face Ethan, his tone now carrying a hint of a warning. "I'm sorry, but you still can't go in. If you continue to cause trouble, we will have to ask you to leave." Ethan's face darkened. He had never been rejected so repeatedly. In the past, he would have lost his temper, but this wasn't the Hawthorne estate, nor was it Cloudcroft. No matter how he felt, he had to endure it. With this thought, Ethan clenched his fists and took a deep breath. "I really do know Sienna. Could you please make an exception? Just tell her that Ethan Hawthorne wants to see her." By the end, Ethan's voice was laced with an undeniable humility and pleading. However, the two soldiers remained motionless, like a cold, unyielding wall, completely blocking his path to Sienna. The commotion started to attract the attention of the surrounding guests, who began to whisper among themselves. Someone had already recognized Ethan. After all, the scandal of the younger Hawthorne son impersonating his brother to sleep with his sister-in-law had been a massive story. It had even made the headlines of many newspapers and had been featured on the television news. Even the residents of this remote island had heard about it. Although Sienna hadn't been on the island for long, it was long enough for them to get a sense of her character. The thought of such a kind and understanding young woman being treated so terribly by Ethan ignited a spark of anger in the kind-hearted islanders, and they immediately rose to her defense. How dare a man like him show his face and look for Miss Hayes? If I were you, I'd just go hang myself. What bad luck to run into someone like him on such a happy day. Tui, the crowd grew angrier and angrier, until finally, someone couldn't hold back any longer and took a swing POW. A gust of wind suddenly rushed towards Ethan. Before he could react, a fist slammed into his face. Thud. The old Ethan could have easily dodged that punch. But the current Ethan, his body weakened by recent events and the exhaustive search for Sienna, no longer had the same strength. Caught completely off guard, Ethan was knocked to the ground. Before he could even catch his breath, the crowd surged forward, kicking and punching him. Under the heavy blows, Ethan could almost hear the cracking of his own bones. It wasn't until the crowd had vented their anger that they finally backed off. Ethan lay on the ground, covered in blood, motionless. After a moment, he managed to lift a hand and wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. To avoid disturbing the wedding inside, a few strong men from the crowd came forward, dragged Ethan up, and prepared to throw him out. "Get out, get out, get out of here. Don't you dare come back and bother Miss Hayes again if we see you. We'll beat you up every single time. Get lost." Chapter 22. That night, another heavy rain fell on the island. Boom, a clap of thunder, accompanied by a flash of lightning, ripped through the sky, the immense sound causing the glass windows to vibrate. Leo pulled Sienna closer into his embrace, covering her ears with his hands. Once she had fallen back into a deep sleep, he gently released her, got out of bed, put on a robe, and left the room. The moment he stepped out the door with an umbrella, he saw a figure standing in the rain-soaked darkness. Leo's brow furrowed slightly, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected Ethan to still be here so late. After the wedding today, Leo's father's 2 bodyguards had privately told him that a man claiming to be Sienna's husband was causing a scene, demanding to see her. Leo immediately knew it was Ethan. According to Sienna, even if Ethan were to come looking for her, it should have been months from now. For him to be here so soon could only mean that something had happened to the Hawthorne family, forcing Ethan to reveal his identity. At first, Leo hadn't paid it much mind. Sienna would never go back to a man like that. If Ethan had any sense, he would have quietly disappeared from their lives. But no one had expected Ethan to stand outside their house for so long. Sienna had just been confirmed to be pregnant, and he didn't want her to be affected by such a trivial matter. With this thought, he quickened his pace towards the man in the rain. Outside the Lawrence house, Ethan stood motionless in the downpour. He was soaked to the bone, his slightly long hair plastered to his face. The cold seeped through his back, enveloping his entire body and causing him to shiver uncontrollably. But Ethan seemed oblivious to it, his eyes fixed on the closed iron gate in front of him. A whole day. It had been a whole day. From the end of the wedding until now, he had been standing guard outside the Lawrence house. He just wanted to ask Sienna why. Why had she suddenly left him without any warning? Why had she suddenly married someone else? He had told her that once Jocelyn's child was born, he would come back to her and they would start over. Why couldn't she have just waited a little longer? As Ethan's mind reeled in confusion, the closed iron gate was opened from the inside, and a figure holding an umbrella slowly walked towards him. Instantly, a spark of light ignited in Ethan's hollow eyes. He couldn't wait for the person to reach him and rushed forward. Sienna, but when the large black umbrella was lifted, it revealed the face of a strange man. Crack, another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, momentarily illuminating the darkness. This time, Ethan finally got a clear look at the man who had stolen his Sienna. "It's you." In that moment, Ethan finally remembered who the man before him was. A long time ago, shortly after the news of his death had spread, a matchmaker had come to their door to propose to Sienna. One particular matchmaker had come 7 times, and no matter how many times he had chased her away, she kept coming back. It was from her that he had learned Leo Lawrence's name and seen his face. No, that wasn't right. Before the matchmaker, he had briefly met Leo. One day, he had accompanied the commissar to visit Leo's grandfather. The man had hurried down the stairs, nodded a quick greeting, and then rushed out the door. Even though it was just a glance, Ethan could feel an inexplicable hostility from Leo. At the time, he hadn't understood, but now it all made sense. Leo had been coveting his wife even back then. You're asking for it. Chapter 23, a surge of rage welled up in Ethan's heart, and he swung his fist at Leo. Leo sidestepped the punch with lightning speed and countered with a jab to Ethan's face. Bam! This was not the loving, gentle Leo who was always with Sienna. This Leo was cold and composed, his brow furrowed, his dark eyes narrowed dangerously. Since Ethan had come at him like this, there was no need for him to be polite. The black umbrella fell to the muddy ground, splashing water everywhere. Lightning flashed repeatedly across the sky as the 2 men, like madmen, exchanged blows, though it was mostly Leo who was landing the punches. After just a few exchanges, Ethan's face was covered in blood. He leaned against the gate, his face pale, the white light of the lightning illuminating his haggard features again and again. The blood on the ground around him had already been washed away by the rain. He tried to push himself up but couldn't move an inch. A sharp pain shot through every nerve in his body. Leo finally lowered his fists, took a handkerchief from his pocket, and slowly wiped the blood from his hands. He then picked up the black umbrella, wiped off the mud, and opened it again. "Ethan Hawthorne, don't come back here again. Sienna is newly pregnant, and her condition is unstable. She can't see you. If you insist on seeing her, I'll have to call the Hawthorne family and ask them how they raised their son." Pregnant. Ethan, who had been looking down, snapped his head up. What did you just say? Who's pregnant? Whose child is it?" Leo sneered. "Mine, of course." The words were like a giant, invisible hand that ripped open Ethan's chest. A cold, icy wind rushed in, freezing him solid. He couldn't see or hear anything. The heart that had been beating so furiously in his chest suddenly stopped. He stood there, stunned, as a storm raged within him. Before coming to this island, before all of this had been exposed, he had dreamed of returning to Sienna and having several children with her, so she wouldn't have to resent Jocelyn anymore. But now his eyes were fixed on Leo, who had just told him, word for word, that Sienna was pregnant with his child. In an instant, Ethan felt as if his heart had been hacked to pieces and ground into a bloody pulp. His breathing became ragged and heavy, his chest heaving as if each breath brought a tearing pain. From Sienna's sudden disappearance to seeing her marry and have a child with another man, everything was telling him that Sienna was truly done with him. The lie he had been weaving for himself had finally, completely unraveled. In a daze, he remembered their wedding night. She had told him with utmost seriousness that if he ever betrayed her, she would leave him forever. At the time, he had overestimated her love for him and had brushed off her vow as a joke. That was why he had repeatedly convinced himself that his actions with Jocelyn were for a good reason. He was doing it for his brother, to help his widowed sister-in-law survive, to give the Hawthorne family and his brother an heir. He was just temporarily sacrificing their little family for the greater good. Once everything was over, he would tell Sienna the whole truth. Sienna was so understanding, she would surely understand and support him. But now, everyone and everything was telling him that he was wrong, so incredibly wrong. Heh heh, a self-deprecating laugh escaped Ethan's lips, quickly swallowed by the roar of the rain. Leo had no desire to waste any more time on a man like him. He turned and walked back into the house without a second thought. The moment the cold iron gate closed in front of Ethan, he collapsed to the ground, his face pressed against the cold, hard pavement, his tears mixing with the rain. His shoulders trembled violently, and a long-suppressed sob escaped him, a sound so faint in the downpour, yet filled with an endless sorrow and despair. Sienna. Chapter 24. Inside the Lawrence house, it was as warm as spring, untouched by the cold weather outside. Leo had just changed his clothes and opened the bedroom door when he saw his wife sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes and sleepily asking where he had been. Leo paused, the memory of the recent scene darkening his eyes. Then he put on a nonchalant expression, walked over and pulled her into a hug, kissing her. "Nowhere special, just went to the port to buy you some snacks." Hearing this, Sienna's eyes widened and she looked outside. "In such a heavy rain, what if you catch a cold?" "Don't worry, I'm in good health. Besides, our baby was hungry, and as the father, I have to provide." He then placed his hand on Sienna's belly, his eyes filled with a gentle warmth. At the mention of the baby, Sienna covered his hand with her own, her gaze soft as she looked at her belly. She had never thought she would be a mother. After the devastating news of Ethan's death, her health had suffered. Coupled with everything that had happened since, her doctor had told her it would be very difficult for her to conceive. But she had defied the odds. Sienna cherished this hard-won child and paid little attention to the outside world. She trusted whatever Leo told her and didn't feel the need to question him. And it was because of this trust that Leo had kept the news of Ethan's arrival on the island a secret from her. He didn't want his wife to be hurt by a man like that again. After dinner, Leo stayed by Sienna's side until she was fast asleep before going downstairs. Due to Sienna's pregnancy, both their families had sent people to help take care of them. As he came down, the nanny who had been standing by the window approached him and greeted him. "Sir," Leo nodded. "Is he still there?" The nanny replied quickly. "He's been standing there for almost another night." "HMPH," Leo scoffed. "Don't bother with him anymore. Whatever happens to him has nothing to do with us." He then instructed the nanny, Sienna has been having some morning sickness lately. Make the food light and not too greasy. The cured meat and bamboo shoots that the Hayes family sent last time should be made into a soup. Yes, sir. After the servant left, Leo went to the landline and made a call. Hello, please connect me to the Hawthorne residence. Thank you. Although Leo no longer paid attention to Ethan, Sienna couldn't stay cooped up at home forever. She would eventually want to go out for walks and work. So, to prevent Ethan from bothering them again, he called the Hawthorne family and asked them to come and take him away. You have 1 month at most. Otherwise, I'll have to have Ethan escorted back myself. As he said this, a ruthless glint flashed in Leo's eyes. Another rainy night. Ethan had lost track of how many days he had been standing outside the Lawrence house. He could feel his body giving out, but he still hadn't seen Sienna. The rain grew heavier, and the lights in the Lawrence house went out one by one. As the last light was extinguished, the light in Ethan's eyes faded as well. He knew that today was another fruitless vigil. His heart felt as if it had been hollowed out, leaving only an endless despair and coldness. Leo's words echoed in his ears, but he just couldn't accept it. He and Sienna had been so in love. When he had died, she had even wanted to join him in death. But now she wouldn't even grant him a single meeting. Heh! A bitter smile played on Ethan's lips. He looked up at the dark sky, the rain pelting his face, as if even the heavens were mocking him. Thud. With a final groan, he could no longer hold on. His vision went black, and he collapsed to the ground. The relentless rain continued to fall, as if trying to drown him and her in this cold, indifferent world. In a daze, he thought he heard someone desperately calling his name. Ethan? Chapter 25. In a hospital room, a feverish and unconscious Ethan was dreaming. In his dream, he saw Sienna, whom he hadn't seen in so long. She was curled up in his arms, just like she used to be, sweetly calling his name. But just as he was about to lean down and kiss her, the Sienna in his arms suddenly changed her expression, pushed him away, and ran into the arms of another man. No matter how much he begged and pleaded, she ignored him. Ethan Hawthorne, you betrayed me first, so I don't want you anymore. She walked away so decisively, without a single glance back. No, don't go. Ethan's eyes flew open. He let out a roar, his hands frantically searching around him. Then, his palm touched something soft. Still not fully conscious, he thought it was Sienna. A look of joy spread across his face, and he pulled her into his arms, kissing her and pleading. Don't go, don't leave me, I'm begging you. Jocelyn, who had just arrived after a long boat journey, never expected her reunion with Ethan to be like this. When she first learned that the man she had slept with for nearly 2 years was not her husband, but her brother-in-law, she felt as if her world had collapsed. A widow, committing incest with her brother-in-law. Whether it was consensual or not, she would be drowned in the spit of outsiders and even sent to a labor camp by the disciplinary committee. Jocelyn had just escaped the living hell of her own family and was finally living a good life. If she had to go back to that, she would rather die. That was what she had thought, and that was what she had planned to do. Her reputation was already ruined, her family didn't want her, and Ethan didn't want her. What was the point of living? But just as Jocelyn was about to kill herself, Margaret had rushed in and desperately stopped her. She said that the Hawthorne family had already wronged her, and if they drove her to her death, they would have no face left. So Margaret had taken it upon herself to arrange for Ethan to marry her. But Ethan's opposition was so fierce that he had even run off to the island to win Sienna back, just to make them give up. Margaret, however, was not one to give up easily. She bought Jocelyn a boat ticket to the island, arranged for the necessary permits, and told her that if she could bring Ethan back, they would have the Civil Affairs Office come to them and issue the marriage license on the spot. In the past, Jocelyn would never have accepted marrying her brother-in-law. But after being husband and wife with Ethan for nearly 2 years, not only had her body grown accustomed to him, but her heart had also slowly started to have feelings for him. Her reputation was already ruined anyway. She might as well marry him and have children. At least her future would be secure. So Jocelyn had come. She had prepared herself for all sorts of reactions from Ethan, but she had never expected him to be so passionate with her the moment they met. He held her tightly, kissing her frantically, begging her not to leave him. His passionate display made Jocelyn feel a momentary sense of dizziness, as if they had gone back to their 2 years of sweet, blissful time together. At this thought, She blushed and wrapped her arms around his neck, about to kiss him back. But the next moment, Ethan called out another woman's name. "Sienna, don't go, I'm begging you." Splash. The name, Sienna, was like a bucket of ice-cold water poured over Jocelyn's head, chilling her to the bone. In an instant, a complex mix of shame, anger, and grief washed over her. She had already given herself to him. Why did he still have to call out another woman's name? At this thought, she could no longer hold back. With a strength she didn't know she had, she pushed Ethan away. "Ethan Hawthorne, take a good look at who I am." Ethan, who was in the middle of passionately kissing Sienna, was caught off guard by the shove. He didn't immediately react and reached out to grab Jocelyn's hand again. "Sienna, don't be angry, okay? I can explain everything." Ethan Hawthorne, another desperate roar. This time, Ethan finally snapped out of it. He shook his head and finally saw who was in front of him. In an instant, the passion and frenzy on his face vanished like a receding tide, leaving only a cold, indifferent mask. "What are you doing here?" Chapter 26, faced with Ethan's cold and distant tone, Jocelyn's heart ached. She dug her nails into her palm and finally relayed Margaret's decision to him. Upon hearing that his mother wanted him to marry Jocelyn, Ethan's face immediately darkened. His eyes held no warmth, and his voice was flat and emotionless. "And you want to marry me too?" Jocelyn looked at the face that was identical to her late husband's, and, as if possessed, she nodded. A large part of why she had been willing to marry Ethan's brother in the first place was because of this face. Even if Ethan didn't love her, with this face and a son who looked just like him, she wouldn't be at a loss. But she couldn't say that. "I've told you, with my reputation now, no one will marry me. If I don't marry you, who else can I marry?" After hearing this predictable answer, Ethan was filled with exhaustion. If he had known back then that pretending to be his brother, and having a child with Jocelyn to give her a reason to live, and his brother piece would cause so much trouble, he would never have done it. He leaned back against the bed, closed his eyes, and rubbed his temples, his voice filled with helplessness. "But you know I don't love you, and I can't marry you. All the kindness I showed you before was because of my brother. Besides, I came to this island to win Sienna back and be her husband again." Ever since Sienna had entered his life, Ethan had no eyes for anyone else. Hearing Ethan's words, Jocelyn felt a sense of irony. After arriving on the island, she had specifically inquired about Sienna's situation. Now, not only was Sienna married to Leo Lawrence, but she was also pregnant. Their relationship was as strong as ever, and no one could break them apart. It was a lie to say she wasn't jealous, but Jocelyn didn't have time to be jealous of Sienna. Her priority was to hold on to Ethan, so she chose to shatter his daydream. "Don't even think about it. You can't win her back. Besides, if we're talking about being a couple, I've spent more time in bed with you than you ever did with her." And wasn't it true? When Ethan and Sienna were newlyweds, they were separated by his missions. Not long after the incident happened, and when he returned, he had been sleeping with Jocelyn ever since. "And we almost had a child together, Ethan. No woman would ever take back a man like you, except for me." Something in her words must have triggered him, because the once calm Ethan suddenly erupted in a fit of rage, grabbing the nearest object and throwing it at Jocelyn. "That's enough, get out." Get out. Meanwhile, Sienna was oblivious to what was happening with Ethan and Jocelyn. After being carefully looked after by Leo, her pregnancy had stabilized. After being cooped up at home for over a month, she was finally able to go out for walks. On a whim, she pestered Leo to take her to the newly opened department store in town to buy some clothes and formula for the baby in advance. Since the department store wasn't far, they didn't drive, instead walking slowly down the mountain road. Along the way, Sienna was like a bird freed from its cage, looking at everything with wide-eyed curiosity. Leo didn't stop her, simply staying close by to ensure her safety. Once inside the department store, they went straight to the second floor, to the mother and baby section. Since they didn't know if the baby was a boy or a girl, they bought 2 sets of everything. But when they went to the counter to pay, the cashier told them that someone had already paid for their items. Chapter 27, Sienna and Leo exchanged a confused glance. They hadn't helped anyone recently, and it was unlikely that someone would be kind enough to pay for all their things for no reason. At first, Sienna thought the cashier was joking, but when she was shown the receipt, they had no choice but to believe it. The couple initially dismissed it as a one-time occurrence, Perhaps a friend who had seen them but didn't have time to say hello and chose to greet them this way instead. They thought they would just find out who it was later and thank them in person. But to their surprise, the same thing happened every time they went to a new store. Over time, Sienna began to feel uneasy. She looked at Leo with concern, her mind racing with all sorts of bad possibilities. What if someone was trying to frame them? Compared to Sienna's fear, Leo was much calmer. From these incidents, he had a good idea of who was behind it. And just a moment ago, he had caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, which only confirmed his suspicions. With this in mind, he comforted Sienna and took her to a newly opened restaurant for dinner. While they were waiting for their food, Leo made up an excuse, telling Sienna to start eating and that he would be right back. In a small alley, Leo kicked Ethan to the ground, his expression cold, a hint of anger simmering in his dark eyes. "I knew it was you, Ethan," who had discharged himself from the hospital before he had fully recovered, was easily knocked down by the kick and couldn't find the strength to get back up. But despite this, his face still held an expression of smug certainty. "So what if it was me? I told you, Sienna is my wife. You're just a thief who can't steal her away from me to get rid of Jocelyn and win back Sienna." Ethan had snuck out of the hospital when no one was looking. He had asked around and finally found the woman he had been longing for, and the man beside her, Leo. Unlike the radiant woman he had first seen upon his return, she now had a maternal glow, and her belly was slightly rounded. That rounded belly was like a sharp knife that tore his heart to shreds, the bitter taste of blood filling his mouth. But Ethan forced himself to swallow the bitterness. After all, he had been the one to have a child with someone else first. Now he was willing to accept her and her child with another man. He would raise this child as his own. But that was only if Sienna was willing to come with him. So, to convince her, he had come up with this plan to lure Leo away. But before he could even approach Sienna, he was found by the ever-watchful Leo. Leo couldn't believe Ethan's audacity. Without another word, he was about to punch him. But just then, a loud explosion echoed from the distance. Boom! Leo's fist froze midair. He turned his head in disbelief and saw the restaurant where he and Sienna had been eating engulfed in flames. A thick black smoke covering the entire building like a giant hand. Sienna, a desperate cry escaped his throat, and he ran towards the restaurant like a madman. He didn't notice that behind him, Ethan's face had also turned pale, and he was struggling to get up from the ground, chasing after him. The sky, filled with fire, was a chaotic mix of people's cries and screams, the sounds pounding in Leo's head. An overwhelming sense of regret washed over him, and he slapped himself hard twice. If only he had known he never should have left Sienna alone if anything happened to Sienna, he wouldn't want to live either at this thought. He ran like a madman towards the fire. Chapter 28. Boom! Another violent explosion. Debris and shrapnel flew everywhere like sharp arrows. "Sir, calm down, it's too dangerous in there, you'll be killed if you go in. We've already called for help, the rescue team will be here soon." Seeing Leo about to rush into the fire, the surrounding people quickly ran over and desperately held him back. "Let go of me, my wife is still in there, she's pregnant." Leo's eyes were bloodshot as he fought to break free from their grasp. His mind was blank. All he could think about was Sienna being trapped inside. Nothing could happen to her, get out of my way. With a strength he didn't know he had, he broke free from the crowd and was about to plunge into the fire. "Sir," boom, another massive explosion. The shockwave sent the entire group of people flying, and the scene descended into chaos once more. But in that moment, a figure had already snuck in from another side and rushed into the fire. Ethan, who had been close behind, heard that Sienna was trapped in the fire and immediately, without a thought for his own life, threw himself into the inferno. Although he had experience with fire rescues, the blaze in the restaurant was ferocious. Through the thick black smoke, he could see people, their faces covered, running and crying, their coughs echoing through the air. Figures, blackened and engulfed in flames, ran in desperate panic. Ethan, having had no time to prepare, was quickly surrounded by the fire. He was now treading on a path of crumbling embers, with a wall of fire chasing close behind. The scorching heat hit him like a tidal wave, as if he were in the depths of a terrifying hell. The thick smoke filled his nose and mouth, making it hard to breathe. Tears streamed down his face, and his vision began to blur. He could barely see what was in front of him. His exposed skin was covered in blisters, the burning pain tearing at his nerves and slowing his steps. After what felt like an eternity, he finally saw a familiar figure curled up on the ground, motionless. The relief he had felt for a moment was instantly replaced by a sharp pang of fear. Ethan was about to rush over. Suddenly, a burnt section of the ceiling broke off and came crashing down towards the figure. Sienna, Ethan lunged forward, throwing himself over her. The next moment, the heavy piece of ceiling slammed onto his back. Thud instantly, Ethan's world went black, and he lost consciousness. In the hospital, Jocelyn looked at the man on the bed, his body wrapped in bandages, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. She knew Ethan still loved Sienna, but she had never imagined he loved her to this extent. Loved her so much that he would drag his still recovering body out of the hospital to win her back. Loved her so much that he would risk his own life to save her from a fire, even if it was just someone who looked like her from behind. The more Jocelyn thought about it, the tighter she clenched her fists, her nails digging so deep into her palms that they drew blood, yet she felt no pain. She stared at Ethan, and a recent letter from Margaret came to mind. The letter expressed Margaret's fear that Jocelyn wouldn't be able to bring Ethan back on her own, and that the Hawthorne family would soon send people to help her. But Margaret hoped that before they arrived, Jocelyn could sleep with Ethan again, preferably getting pregnant on the first try, which would give them another bargaining chip for their marriage. At this thought, Jocelyn subconsciously touched her pocket. Inside was the medicine Margaret had sent with the letter. She knew exactly what it was for. She even knew where she was going to use it. Ethan, you wronged me first, so don't blame me for doing this to you. Chapter 29, Ethan was unconscious for a whole week. When he woke up, the first thing he asked was not how long Jocelyn had been by his side. It was about Sienna's condition. When he learned that the person he had saved was not Sienna, and that Sienna had escaped long ago, he was first shocked, then dazed, and finally, as if all his strength had been drained, he collapsed back onto the bed. But a faint smile of relief played on his lips. The sight of that smile was a sharp pain in Jocelyn's eyes, and it only strengthened her resolve to use the drug on him. Hearing that Sienna was also in the same hospital, Ethan, ignoring his own injuries, insisted on getting out of bed to see her. This time, Jocelyn didn't stop him, simply watching him leave in silence. Her mind drifted back to the scene of the fire. When she heard that Ethan had rushed into the fire alone to save Sienna, Jocelyn had been more devastated than anyone. By the time she arrived at the scene, Ethan was already inside. She was frantic, searching everywhere for a rescuer. But then she saw, not far away, Sienna, who was supposed to be in the fire, being held tightly in Leo's arms, the two of them celebrating and kissing. After the initial shock, a strange wave of anger and sorrow washed over her. What would Ethan's reaction be if he knew that the person he was risking his life to save had already escaped and was being held and kissed by another man? Just as she was about to confront them, Leo saw her first. After comforting Sienna and putting her in a car, he walked over to Jocelyn and proposed a collaboration. Their goal was the same, to make Ethan give up on Sienna completely. Jocelyn agreed. The first step was to let Ethan hear, from Sienna's own lips, that she was completely over him and would never go back. As expected, when Ethan, in his wheelchair, reached Sienna's room and was about to knock, he heard Leo mention his name. "Sienna, there's something I want to tell you. It's about Ethan Hawthorne." Outside the door, Ethan's breath caught in his throat, and the hand he had raised to knock froze in midair. He hadn't been in Sienna's presence for a long time. He didn't know how she felt about him now. Was it hatred, or something else? But the voice that came through the door was remarkably calm. "Why bring him up now?" Those few words sent a sharp jolt through his heart, and a piercing pain shot through his entire body. She didn't even want to mention his name anymore? The conversation inside continued, Sienna's tone remaining calm throughout, as if she were talking about a stranger. "I told you, from the moment I agreed to marry you, he became irrelevant to me. As far as I'm concerned, Ethan Hawthorne died in that mission. Everything that happened after that was just my punishment for being blind. I've opened my eyes now, and I won't pay any more attention to him or anything related to him. I just want to live a good life with you. So you don't hate him anymore? Ha! Why would I bother with a dead man?" Those few sentences completely shattered the last remnants of hope in Ethan's heart, and it fell to the ground, breaking into a million pieces that could never be put back together. His face was ashen. He closed his eyes, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles turned white, like a silent, unmoving statue. The dark room was thick with the smell of alcohol. Ethan was slumped on the floor, his eyes glazed over as he swirled the contents of a glass. Several empty bottles lay scattered at his feet. He was pouring alcohol down his throat while calling out Sienna's name, the bitter tears of regret mixing with the liquor and sliding down his throat. The bitterness was like 1,000 needles piercing his entire body, making it hard to breathe. He could no longer hold on and collapsed to the floor. Thud the moment Ethan hit the ground, the shattered bottle sent a spray of liquor flying, blurring his vision. In a daze, he thought he saw Sienna slowly push open the door and walk towards him, just like when they were first married, sweetly calling his name and holding him tight. He thought he was dreaming, so he let himself go completely. He pulled her into his arms, leaned down and kissed her, but tasted only bitterness. His mind, clouded with alcohol, was in a complete fog. He thought she was crying, so he moved his lips to her eyes, kissing away her tears and cooing softly. "SHH, don't cry. I'm here." In the cool night, a light rain began to fall. The wind picked up, and the sound of the rain grew louder, gradually masking the sounds of a man's grunts and a woman's moans coming from inside the room. Chapter 30, after a night of lovemaking, a sober Ethan woke with a splitting headache. He forced his eyes open and saw a woman with long hair obscuring her face lying in his arms. Her smooth, rounded shoulders were covered in red marks, a clear indication of what he had done last night. Ethan's eyes widened in shock, his mind momentarily blank. Just then, the woman in his arms groaned and slowly looked up at him with a smile. "Ethan!" The quiet morning descended into chaos. Ethan couldn't believe he had been drugged and taken advantage of by a woman. A wave of anger washed over him, followed by a surge of despair. Before, when he had slept with Jocelyn, it had been to give her a child. Now, when he was trying to win back Sienna, sleeping with Jocelyn again meant that he and Sienna were truly over. She was so clean, so pure. How could she ever want a man who had been with another woman? He could no longer maintain his composure. He grabbed Jocelyn by the neck, his voice filled with rage. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" But the tighter he squeezed, the louder and more maniacal Jocelyn's laughter became. Finally, in utter disgust, Ethan threw her to the floor. She coughed violently, then looked up at him with cold eyes. "Wake up, Ethan. Stop dreaming. From the moment you decided to fake your death and pretend to be your brother to sleep with me, you and her were over. Besides, for all you know, I might already be carrying your child. If you don't want to go back and register our marriage, I'll release our bed photos to the public. I'll let everyone, especially her, see just how you took me." "Enough, you're a lunatic," Ethan slapped her across the face, his heart filled with regret. If only he had known. If he had known that he would end up losing his wife and child, he never would have been so soft-hearted as to help Jocelyn in the first place. The slap was so hard that Jocelyn coughed up a mouthful of blood. The blood stained her pale lips red, making her look even more crazed and terrifying. "Ethan, I'm warning you one last time. If we don't get our marriage license within 3 days, my people will send those photos to her. Then she'll be dragged into this and be shamed by everyone. And her child, so just accept your fate." Just like her, he should accept his fate. Ethan stared at her motionless. His mind raced, searching for a solution, but in the end, he was met with the bleak reality that there was nothing he could do. From the moment he had heard Sienna's words outside her hospital room, the last shred of their relationship had been severed. Now, if Jocelyn really went through with her threat and caused Sienna to have a miscarriage, he had already disappointed and hurt her enough. He couldn't let it go on. Since that was the case, why didn't he just? Sensing his murderous intent, Jocelyn kindly reminded him, "Don't forget your parents." His clenched fist suddenly relaxed, and the back that had been so straight finally slumped in defeat. A satisfied smile played on Jocelyn's lips. She knew he had given in. Chapter 30, 3 days later, the Hawthorne family came to the island to bring Ethan and Jocelyn home. Seeing the two of them arm in arm and the marriage certificate in Jocelyn's hand, the Hawthornes exchanged a look of relief. The ship's horn blew and black smoke billowed from its funnel. Ethan stood on the deck, rubbing the wedding ring on his finger, his eyes filled with bitterness. When he and Sienna got married, he had spent half a year's salary on this ring. When he had placed it on her finger, Ethan, who had never shed a tear even in the face of bloodshed, had cried like a child. He had whispered countless sweet nothings to her, made countless vows. But in the end, he had broken every single one of them. He had even been the one to shatter the most basic trust between a husband and wife. So, he deserved everything that had happened to him. Finally, he threw the ring into the ocean, burying the marriage he had personally destroyed along with it. Sienna, goodbye, we will never meet again. At the Lawrence house, upon hearing the news of Ethan and Jocelyn's marriage and departure, Leo let out his first relaxed smile in days. Finally, he was gone for good. Now, no one would be trying to steal his wife. At this thought, he pulled the sleeping woman in his arms closer and kissed her fiercely. Sienna swatted at him a few times. What's gotten into you now? Ever since she got pregnant, Leo had been more nervous than she was, his behavior becoming stranger and stranger. Leo, having been playfully hit by his wife, just grinned sheepishly. Nothing. Just that the annoying fly has finally been swatted away. Sienna rolled her eyes, snuggled deeper into his arms, and closed her eyes to go back to sleep, a faint smile playing on her lips. In truth, she had known for a while that Leo was hiding something from her, something related to Ethan. At their wedding, she had seen Ethan rushing towards her like a madman, but she had already moved on, so she hadn't paid him any mind. She also knew that Leo had been dealing with Ethan-related matters while she was asleep. She even knew that Ethan had written her an apology letter before he left, which Leo had torn up. But she didn't care. Because she loved him, she knew that Leo was doing all of this for her and their baby. Because she didn't care about Ethan, whether he lived or died was none of her business. All she wanted now was to cherish the man before her, to live a good life with him and their future child. That was all she wanted. 7 months later, Sienna and Leo's daughter was born. Perhaps because this child was so hard-won, they named her Celeste, meaning heaven's love, their most precious gift. The baby was showered with love and attention from the moment she was born. On the day of her 1-month celebration, both sets of parents traveled thousands of miles to the island to celebrate with them. Along with a mountain of gifts came a letter. My mother looked at her son-in-law and sighed. I wasn't going to give this to you, but Margaret kept begging me. You know how Sienna is, I don't want to upset her. Read this, then burn it. Don't tell her. After the scandal of Ethan faking his death and sleeping with his sister-in-law was exposed, my family had cut all ties with the Hawthorns. Now, seeing each other again, things were so different. Leo nodded and took the letter from my mother, walking to a corner to read it. He had expected it to be another one of Ethan's sappy letters to Sienna, but to his surprise, it was an apology. The letter said that after Ethan returned, he was plagued by nightmares. In his dreams, he would repeatedly go back to the day his brother died, trying to change his fate, but it was always in vain. The constant nightmares had caused him to develop a mental illness, and he would often mistake Jocelyn for Sienna. At first, Jocelyn, thinking they had a child together, tried to endure it. But when he started making their son call the Sienna in the photo Mommy, Jocelyn finally snapped. In the ensuing struggle, both were severely injured. Ethan's leg was broken, leaving him partially disabled, and Jocelyn was blinded and also developed a mental illness. As for the child conceived through Jocelyn's drugging, he was so traumatized that he became mute and was later diagnosed with a severe heart condition, becoming a fragile child who relied on medicine to survive. Ethan wasn't writing this letter to ask for pity, but to apologize. He said he had wronged Sienna and didn't dare ask for her forgiveness. He only hoped that she could live a peaceful and happy life, and that all her pain and suffering would be transferred to him. Leo sneered and casually tossed the letter into the fire. In the distance, Sienna was holding their daughter and waving at him. He strode over and held them both tightly. Sienna, I'm so lucky to have you and our daughter. Sienna smiled and leaned against his shoulder. I'm lucky too, to have met you and to have our daughter.